The sun beat down on Iron Ridge like a punishment. Mara Vance stepped off the supply wagon at the edge of town, her boots hitting the ground with a soft thud that no one noticed. The driver didn't say goodbye. He just clicked his tongue at the horses and rolled away, leaving her standing in the middle of a street that looked like it had given up years ago. The buildings leaned, the paint had peeled away to gray wood. Even the saloon sign hung crooked, creaking in the hot wind. A few people moved along the boardwalk, but they didn't look at her. Not really. Their eyes slid past her like she was part of the dust. Mara adjusted the strap of her worn canvas bag and started walking. She'd been traveling for 3 weeks, moving from town to town, looking for work, cooking work. It was the only thing she knew how to do well. And in places like this, places where people were hanging on by their fingernails, a good cook could be worth something. But every town had been the same. No work for women, not hiring. Try somewhere else. Iron Ridge was supposed to be different. She'd heard about a ranch just outside of town, a place called the Mercer Spread. It was struggling, people said. Short on hands, short on everything. The kind of place that couldn't afford to be picky. Mara hoped that was true. She walked past the general store, where 2 men sat on a bench, watching her with flat, unreadable expressions. One of them spat into the dirt. "Lost, ma'am?" he called out. Mara stopped, turned. "No." "You look lost." "I'm not." The man grinned, but it wasn't friendly. "Ain't much here for a woman on her own. I'm looking for work." That got a laugh. The second man leaned back, arms crossed. "Work? Doing what?" "Cooking." "Cooking." He said it like it was the funniest thing he'd heard all week. "Lady, most folks here can barely afford to eat. You think someone's going to pay you to cook?" Mara didn't answer. She just turned and kept walking. Behind her, she heard one of them mutter something. The other one laughed again. She didn't look back. The Mercer Ranch sat about 2 miles outside of town, tucked against a line of low hills that looked like they'd been baked into the earth. The road leading up to it was rutted and dry, and by the time Mara reached the gate, her throat was raw from the dust. The ranch itself was bigger than she'd expected, but it had the same worn-down look as the town. Fences sagged. The barn doors hung crooked. A few cattle grazed in the distance, their ribs showing even from here. Mara stopped at the gate and looked around. A man was working near the corral, hammering at a fence post. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his shirt soaked through with sweat. He didn't look up when she approached. "Excuse me?" Mara called out. The hammering stopped. The man straightened, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. He turned, and Mara got her first good look at him. Cole Mercer. She knew it without asking. He had that look, the kind of man who carried the weight of the world on his shoulders and didn't complain about it. His face was hard, weathered, with lines around his eyes that came from squinting into the sun for too many years. His jaw was set in a way that said he didn't smile much. He looked at her like she was an interruption. "Help you?" His voice was low, rough. "I'm looking for work," Mara said. "Don't need any." "I heard you were short-handed." "Heard wrong." He turned back to the fence post, picked up the hammer. Mara didn't move. "I'm a cook." "Don't need a cook." "Everyone needs a cook." Cole drove the nail into the wood with 3 hard strikes, then stopped. He didn't turn around, but his shoulders tensed. "Lady, I don't know who told you to come out here, but they wasted your time. I've got nothing for you." "You've got men, don't you?" "What's that got to do with anything?" "Men need to eat." "They manage." "I'm sure they do." Mara shifted her bag to the other shoulder. "But I bet they'd manage better with decent food." Cole turned around then, and for the first time he really looked at her. His eyes were gray, sharp, and completely unimpressed. "You don't know what you're asking." "I'm asking for a job. This isn't a charity." "I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking to work." Cole set the hammer down, crossed his arms. "You ever worked a ranch before?" "No." "Ever lived out here? Middle of nowhere? No town nearby? No help if something goes wrong?" "No." "Then you don't know what you're asking." He picked up the hammer again. "Go back to town. Find something easier." Mara felt the heat rise in her chest, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm not looking for easy." "Could have fooled me." That stung. More than it should have, but Mara didn't let it show. She just stood there, watching him work, until he finally stopped and turned around again. "What's your name?" he asked. "Mara Vance." "Well, Mara Vance, I'll say it one more time. I don't need a cook. I don't need another hand. And I sure as hell don't need someone who's going to quit the first time things get hard. I won't quit. You say that now." "I mean it." Cole studied her for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "Doesn't matter. Answer's still no." He turned his back on her and went back to hammering. Mara stood there, anger and frustration building in her chest. She wanted to argue, wanted to make him see that he was wrong, that she could do this, that she needed this, but she knew it wouldn't matter. Men like Cole Mercer didn't change their minds because someone asked nicely. So instead, Mara did something else. She walked away. She didn't go far. There was a creek about a quarter-mile from the ranch house, hidden behind a stand of scrubby trees. Mara had spotted it on the way in, and now she made her way back to it, her mind already working. She dropped her bag by the water and knelt down, washing the dust from her hands and face. Then she opened the bag and pulled out the supplies she'd been carrying. Not much. A small pot, a knife, a few vegetables she'd bought in the last town, some dried beans, a little salt. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Mara built a small fire, filled the pot with water from the creek, and set it over the flames. While the water heated, she chopped the vegetables, onions, carrots, a few potatoes, and tossed them in. The beans went in next, along with the salt and a pinch of wild herbs she'd found growing near the creek. It wasn't fancy, but it didn't need to be. She let it simmer, stirring occasionally, watching the steam rise into the hot afternoon air. The smell filled the space around her, rich and savory, and for the first time all day, Mara felt something close to calm. When the stew was ready, she ladled it into a tin bowl she'd brought with her. Then she covered the pot, banked the fire, and carried the bowl back toward the ranch. Cole was still working when she returned. This time, he was closer to the barn, fixing a broken wheel on an old wagon. He didn't look up when she approached. Mara set the bowl down on a flat stone near where he was working. Then she stepped back. Cole glanced at the bowl, then at her. "What's this?" "Stew. I can see that. What's it doing here?" "It's for you." Cole frowned. "I told you. I know what you told me." Mara cut him off, her voice firm. "And I'm not asking you to change your mind. I'm just leaving this here. You can eat it or you can throw it out. That's up to you." She turned and started walking back toward the road. "Where are you going?" Cole called after her. "Into town." "On foot?" "Unless you've got a horse to lend me." Cole didn't answer. Mara kept walking. Behind her, she heard him mutter something under his breath. But she didn't stop. She just kept going, one foot in front of the other, until the ranch was out of sight behind her. By the time Mara made it back to Iron Ridge, the sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the dirt street. She was exhausted, her legs aching, her throat dry. She found a spot behind the general store where she could sit without being seen, and she leaned back against the wall, closing her eyes. She didn't have a plan, no money for a room, no idea where she'd sleep tonight, but she'd been in worse situations. She'd figure it out. She always did. Cole Mercer stood in the middle of his kitchen staring at the bowl of stew. He'd brought it inside without really thinking about it, and now it sat on the table in front of him, still warm. He should have thrown it out, should have left it where she put it. He didn't need some stranger coming onto his land, trying to guilt him into hiring her, but he hadn't thrown it out. He'd brought it inside, and now he was standing here, looking at it, trying to decide what to do. Finally, he sat down, picked up the spoon, took a bite. The taste hit him like a punch to the chest. It was good. No, it was better than good. It was the kind of food that made you stop and pay attention, the kind that reminded you what eating was supposed to feel like. Cole took another bite, then another. He didn't stop until the bowl was empty. When he set the spoon down, he sat there for a long moment, staring at the table. He thought about the woman, Mara, the way she'd stood there, refusing to beg, refusing to back down. The way she'd walked away without a word, leaving the stew behind like it was a challenge. Judge the work, not the body. She hadn't said it out loud, but she might as well have. Cole pushed the bowl away, scrubbing a hand over his face. He didn't need a cook. He didn't need another person to worry about. But he couldn't stop thinking about that stew. Mara woke to the sound of boots on gravel. She sat up quickly, blinking against the early morning light. A man was standing a few feet away, tall and broad-shouldered, his face shadowed by the brim of his hat. Cole Mercer. Mara scrambled to her feet, brushing the dust off her skirt. "What are you doing here?" Cole looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he sighed. "You got a place to stay?" "I'll manage." "That's not what I asked." Mara hesitated. "No." Cole nodded like he'd expected that. "All right, come on." "Come on where?" "Back to the ranch." He turned and started walking toward a horse tied up nearby. "You want the job or not?" Mara stared at him. "You're hiring me?" "That's what I just said." "Why?" Cole stopped, turned back to her. "Because that stew was the best thing I've eaten in 5 years. And if you can do that with next to nothing, I figure you can handle feeding my crew." He climbed onto the horse, then held out a hand. Mara looked at it, then at him. "You coming?" Cole asked. Mara grabbed his hand and let him pull her up onto the horse. They rode back to the ranch in silence. The crew was already up when they arrived, gathered near the barn. There were 5 of them, rough-looking men with sunburned faces and hard eyes. They stopped what they were doing when they saw Mara. Cole dismounted and helped her down. "This is Mara Vance, he said. "She's the new cook." The men stared at her. One of them, a wiry guy with a scar across his cheek, laughed. "You serious, boss? Do I look like I'm joking?" The man shook his head, still grinning. "No offense, ma'am, but you don't exactly look like ranch material." "She's not here to work the ranch," Cole said. "She's here to cook. That's it." Another man, older, with gray in his beard, spat into the dirt. "We don't need a cook." "I'll decide what we need," Cole said. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that made the man shut up. Cole turned to Mara. "Kitchen's in the house, supplies are in the pantry, breakfast is at 6. You got a problem with that?" "No," Mara said. "Good." He looked at the crew. "Get back to work." The men grumbled, but they moved. Cole walked Mara to the house, showing her the kitchen. It was small, functional, with a wood-burning stove and a sink that barely worked. The pantry was half empty. "It's not much," Cole said. "It'll do." Cole nodded. "All right, I'll let you get settled." He turned to leave, but Mara stopped him. "Why did you change your mind?" Cole paused in the doorway. "I told you, the stew." "That's it?" He looked back at her, and for a moment something flickered in his eyes, something she couldn't quite read. "That's it," he said. Then he was gone. Mara stood in the kitchen, looking around at the space that would be hers. It wasn't much, but it was a start, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she'd found a place worth staying. The first breakfast was a disaster. Not because the food was bad. It wasn't. Mara had worked with what she had, biscuits, gravy, eggs, and it was solid. But the crew didn't care. They ate in silence, barely looking at her, and when they were done, they left without a word. No thanks, no acknowledgement, just cold, hard indifference. Mara cleaned up alone, her hands shaking slightly as she scrubbed the plates. She'd expected resistance, but she hadn't expected this. It felt like being invisible. She dried the last plate and set it on the shelf, then stood there for a moment, staring at the empty kitchen. "You can do this," she told herself. "You've done harder things." But even as she thought it, she wasn't sure she believed it. The days that followed were worse. The crew didn't talk to her, didn't look at her. When she brought food out to them in the fields, they took it without a word and walked away. At night, she could hear them talking outside, their voices low and rough. She couldn't make out the words, but she didn't need to. She knew what they were saying. She doesn't belong here. She won't last. Why'd the boss hire her? Mara kept her head down and focused on the work. She cooked 3 meals a day, cleaned the kitchen, and stayed out of their way. But it wore on her, more than she wanted to admit. On the 5th day, one of the men, the one with the scar, whose name was Tyler, cornered her outside the kitchen. You know you don't belong here, right? He said. Mara looked at him. I'm just doing my job. Your job. Tyler laughed. Lady, you're not doing anything we couldn't do ourselves. Then why aren't you? Tyler's smile faded. Watch your mouth. Or what? He stepped closer, and Mara felt her heart start to pound, but she didn't back down. You think you're tough? Tyler said. You think you can make it out here? I'm still here, aren't I? Tyler stared at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head. Not for long. He walked away, leaving Mara standing there, her hands clenched into fists. That night, Cole found her sitting on the porch, staring out at the empty land. You all right? He asked. Fine. Cole sat down beside her. You don't look fine. Mara didn't answer. They giving you trouble? Cole asked. Nothing I can't handle. That's not what I asked. Mara turned to look at him. Why do you care? Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Because I brought you here. That makes it my responsibility. I don't need you to protect me. I'm not trying to protect you. Cole's voice was steady. I'm just asking if you're all right. Mara looked away. I'm fine. Cole didn't push. He just sat there, the two of them in silence, until finally he stood up. If that changes, he said, you let me know. Then he walked away. Mara sat there for a long time after he was gone, staring out at the dark horizon. She wasn't fine, but she would be. She had to be. The heat came 3 weeks later, and it came without mercy. Mara woke before dawn to a stillness that felt wrong. The air was thick, heavy, pressing down on everything like a weight. She stood on the porch, watching the sky turn from black to gray to a pale, washed-out blue that promised nothing good. By mid-morning, the temperature had climbed past anything she'd felt before. The sun wasn't just hot, it was vicious. It beat down on the ranch like it was trying to burn everything away. The men worked in silence, their shirts soaked through before noon. Mara brought water out to them, but they barely acknowledged her. They just drank and went back to work, their faces tight with exhaustion. Cole was out with them, working harder than anyone. He'd stripped down to his undershirt, his skin already burned red across his shoulders. When Mara approached with the water bucket, he took a ladle without looking at her. How long is this supposed to last? She asked. Long as it wants to. Cole drained the ladle and handed it back. Weather doesn't ask permission. The cattle, I know. His voice was flat. Nothing we can do about it except keep them watered and hope. He walked away before she could say anything else. Mara stood there watching him go, the empty ladle still in her hand. The land around her shimmered in the heat, distorting everything. The hills looked like they were melting. She'd never seen anything like this, and she had no idea how bad it was about to get. The first cow died on the 4th day. Mara heard the commotion from the kitchen, raised voices, the sound of boots running. She wiped her hands on her apron and went outside. The men were gathered near the south pasture. Cole was crouched down next to something on the ground. When Mara got closer, she saw what it was. A young heifer, lying on its side, tongue swollen, eyes half open, dead. Heat got her, one of the men said. His name was Davis, a middle-aged guy with a thick mustache. Probably been down since this morning. Cole didn't say anything. He just stood up, staring down at the carcass. We lose any more, Mlet? He asked. Not yet, but they're struggling. Davis wiped his forehead. Water's running low in the creek. If this keeps up, I know. Cole turned and walked away. The men watched him go, then started dragging the dead cow toward a ravine where they'd dump it. Mara followed Cole back toward the barn. He was walking fast, his jaw tight. Cole, she called. He didn't stop. Cole. He spun around. What? Mara stopped a few feet away. Is there anything I can do? You're doing it. Keep the men fed. That's all I need from you. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Mara hesitated. I want to help. Cole looked at her, and for a moment something flickered across his face, something close to frustration, or maybe exhaustion. You want to help? He said. then stay out of the way." He turned and walked into the barn, leaving her standing there. Mara stood in the sun, feeling the heat press down on her shoulders. She wanted to be angry, wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she could do more than just cook. But she didn't, because deep down, she wasn't sure he was wrong. By the end of the first week, 2 more cows were dead. The remaining cattle were gaunt, their ribs showing through their hides. The men worked from dawn until well past dark, trying to keep the animals alive, but it was a losing battle. The supplies in the pantry started to dwindle. Flour, salt, beans, everything was running low, and there was no way to get more. The town was too far, and even if they could spare someone to make the trip, there was no guarantee they'd find anything. The heat had hit the whole region. Mara did what she could. She stretched the food as far as it would go, watering down stews, making biscuits smaller, rationing everything. But it wasn't enough. The men started to complain. "This is it?" Tyler said one night, staring at his plate. "This is all we get?" "It's what we have," Mara said. "It's not enough." "Then don't eat it." Tyler slammed his fork down. "You think this is funny?" "No, I think we're all in the same situation, and complaining about it won't change anything." Tyler stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "You know what I think? I think you're the problem. Ever since you got here, everything's gone to hell." "Sit down, Tyler," Davis said from across the table. "No, I'm tired of this." Tyler pointed at Mara. "She shows up out of nowhere, the boss hires her for no reason, and now we're starving. You telling me that's a coincidence?" "It's the heat," Davis said. "Not her." "You sure about that?" The room went quiet. The other men looked at each other, uncomfortable. Mara felt her chest tighten. "If you have a problem with me, say it to my face." Tyler laughed. "I just did." "Then what do you want me to do about it?" "I want you to leave." The words hung in the air. Mara stared at him, her heart pounding. She wanted to say something, wanted to defend herself, but the truth was she didn't know what to say. Because part of her wondered if he was right. Before she could respond, the door opened. Cole walked in, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. "What's going on?" he asked. "Nothing," Tyler said quickly. Cole looked at Mara, then at Tyler. "Didn't sound like nothing." "Just talking, boss." Cole's eyes narrowed. "About what?" Tyler hesitated. Then he said, "About how we're running out of food. We all know that. Yeah, well, some of us think maybe it's time to make some changes." "What kind of changes?" Tyler glanced at Mara, then back at Cole. "I'm just saying, maybe we don't need a cook right now. Maybe we could use that money for something else." Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "She stays." "Boss, she stays. End of discussion." Tyler's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He just grabbed his plate and walked out, slamming the door behind him. The other men followed, leaving Mara and Cole alone in the kitchen. Mara stood there, her hands shaking. She didn't look at Cole. She didn't want him to see how rattled she was. "You all right?" Cole asked. "Fine." "You don't look fine." "I said I'm fine." Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Don't let Tyler get to you. He's angry. We all are. But that's not your fault." "Feels like it is." "It's not." Mara finally looked at him. "Then why does everyone blame me?" Cole didn't have an answer for that. The heat stretched into a second week, then a third. The ranch was falling apart. The men were exhausted, snapping at each other over nothing. The cattle were dying faster now, 1 every day, sometimes 2. The water in the creek had dropped to a trickle, and the food was almost gone. Mara stood in the pantry, staring at the nearly empty shelves. A little flour, a handful of beans, some dried meat that was more gristle than anything else. It wasn't enough. She closed the pantry door and leaned against it, trying to think. She could ration it even more, make the portions smaller. But the men were already on edge. If she cut their food again, there was no telling what would happen. She needed more supplies. But where? Mara thought about the land around the ranch. She'd seen wild plants growing near the creek, things she recognized from other places she'd lived. Dandelion greens, wild onions, maybe some cattail roots if she looked hard enough. It wasn't much, but it was something. She grabbed a basket and headed out. The creek was almost dry now, just a thin stream running through cracked mud. Mara walked along the banks, searching for anything edible. She found dandelion greens first, bitter but nutritious. Then wild onions, their stalks thin and pale. She kept searching, moving farther downstream, and eventually found a small patch of cattails growing in a muddy pool. She dug up the roots, shaking off the dirt, and added them to the basket. It took her hours, but by the time she headed back to the ranch, the basket was full. It still wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. That night, Mara made a stew. She used the last of the beans, the dried meat, and everything she'd gathered from the creek. She boiled it all together, adding salt and a few wild herbs she'd found. The smell filled the kitchen, earthy and strange. When the men came in for dinner, they stared at their bowls. "What is this?" Tyler asked. "Stew," Mara said. "Doesn't look like stew." "It's what we have, Dee." Tyler poked at it with his spoon. "What's in it?" "Beans, meat, vegetables." "What kind of vegetables?" "Does it matter?" Tyler looked up at her. "Yeah, it matters." Mara set down the pot she was holding. Dandelion greens, wild onions, cattail roots. All things that grow wild around here. All things that are perfectly safe to eat. "You're feeding us weeds?" "I'm feeding you what I can find. If you don't want it, don't eat it." Tyler pushed the bowl away. "I'm not eating this. Suit yourself." He stood up and walked out. The other men looked at each other. Then, one by one, they started eating. Davis took a bite, chewed slowly, then nodded. "It's not bad." Another man tried it. "Better than nothing." Slowly, the tension in the room eased. Mara watched them eat, her heart still pounding. She'd taken a risk, and it had paid off. For now. The next morning, Mara went out again. This time she went farther from the ranch, searching for more food. She found wild berries growing on a hillside, small, tart, but edible. She picked as many as she could carry. She also found rabbit tracks near a rocky outcrop. She didn't have a rifle, but she knew how to set a snare. She'd done it before, years ago. When she was younger and hungrier, she set 3 snares and marked the locations in her mind. The next day she checked them. 2 were empty. But the third had a rabbit. Mara cleaned it quickly, efficiently, and brought it back to the ranch. That night, she made rabbit stew. The men ate in silence, but this time there were no complaints. Even Tyler ate. After dinner, Cole found her outside, washing pots by the well. "Where'd you get the rabbit?" he asked. "Caught it." Cole raised an eyebrow. "You set snares?" "Yeah." "Where'd you learn that?" "Here and there." Cole was quiet for a moment, then he said, "You're doing good work, Mara." Mara looked up at him, surprised. "You think so?" "I know so." It was the first time he'd said anything like that, the first time he'd acknowledged her as more than just the cook. Mara felt something warm settle in her chest. "Thanks." Cole nodded, then he walked away. Mara watched him go, a small smile on her face. But the warmth didn't last long, because the heat wasn't done with them yet. 3 days later, the well started to run dry. Mara noticed it first. The bucket came up lighter than usual, the water barely enough to fill a pot. She lowered it again, and it came up the same. She told Cole immediately. He checked the well himself, then stood there, staring down into the dark hole like he could will the water back into existence. "How long do we have?" Mara asked. "A few days, maybe less." "What do we do?" "There's another well on the north end of the property. Hasn't been used in years, but it might still have water." Cole turned to her. "I'll take a few men up there tomorrow, see if we can get it working again." "And if you can't?" Cole didn't answer. He didn't have to. That night, Mara lay awake in her small room, staring at the ceiling. She thought about the well, the heat, the dying cattle, the men who barely tolerated her. She thought about leaving. It would be easy. Just pack her bag and walk away. Go back to the road, find another town, start over somewhere else. But something stopped her. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was pride. Or maybe it was the way Cole had looked at her earlier, like he actually believed she could do this. Whatever it was, it kept her there. The next morning, Cole and 3 men rowed out to the north well. Mara watched them go, then turned back to the kitchen. She still had work to do. She spent the day gathering more wild plants, setting more snares, doing everything she could to stretch their supplies. By evening, she'd managed to put together another meal. Thin, but enough. The men ate without complaint, but Tyler sat at the end of the table watching her, not eating, just watching. Mara tried to ignore him, but she could feel his eyes on her. After dinner, she was washing dishes when he approached. "You think you're smart, don't you?" he said. Mara didn't look at him. "I think I'm doing my job." "Your job?" Tyler laughed. "You're not fooling anyone, you know. We all see what you're doing." "And what's that?" "Trying to make yourself look good. Trying to make the boss think he needs you." Mara turned to face him. "I don't care what the boss thinks. I care about keeping people fed." "Right, because you're so noble." "What do you want from me, Tyler?" He stepped closer. "I want you gone." "That's not your decision." "Maybe not. But sooner or later, the boss is going to realize you're more trouble than you're worth. And when he does, you're out." Mara held his gaze. "We'll see." Tyler stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away. Mara stood there, her hands gripping the edge of the sink. She was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of proving herself over and over again. But she wasn't giving up. Not yet. Cole and the men returned 2 days later, covered in dust and sweat. Mara was outside when they rode in. She could tell by the look on Cole's face that it hadn't gone well. "Well?" she asked. Cole dismounted, pulling off his hat. "It's dry." Mara felt her stomach drop. "Completely?" "Yeah." "What do we do now?" Cole looked out at the ranch, his jaw tight. "We ration what we have. Make it last as long as possible. And we hope the heat breaks before we run out. And if it doesn't?" Cole didn't answer. He just walked past her toward the house. Mara stood there, watching him go. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the well, the water, the ranch. If they ran out of water, it was over. The cattle would die. The men would leave. Everything Cole had worked for would be gone. And there was nothing she could do about it. Or was there? Mara sat up in bed, her mind racing. There had to be something. Some way to find more water, more food, something. She thought about the land around the ranch. The creek was almost dry, but it still had a little water. Maybe if she went farther upstream, she'd find a pool that hadn't dried up yet. It was a long shot, but it was better than doing nothing. The next morning, before anyone else was awake, Mara packed a bag and set out. She followed the creek bed north, moving farther from the ranch than she'd ever gone. The sun was already hot, even this early, and the ground was cracked and hard beneath her feet. She walked for hours searching. And then she found it, a small pool hidden behind a cluster of rocks. The water was low, but it was there. Mara knelt down, scooping up a handful. It was cool, clear. She filled every container she'd brought, working quickly, and then headed back. By the time she reached the ranch, the sun was high and brutal. She was exhausted, her legs shaking, but she didn't stop. She went straight to the kitchen and started cooking. That night, she served the men a meal made with the fresh water. It wasn't much, just a simple stew, but it tasted better than anything they'd had in weeks. The men ate in silence, and for the first time, Mara saw something different in their faces. Not gratitude exactly, but something close to respect. After dinner, Cole found her outside. "Where'd you get the water?" he asked. "Found a pool upstream." "How far?" "Few miles." Cole frowned. "You walked that far on your own?" "Yeah." "That's dangerous." "So is dying of thirst." Cole didn't argue. He just looked at her, and for a moment Mara thought she saw something in his eyes, something that looked almost like admiration. "You shouldn't have done that," he said quietly. "But I did." "I know." He paused. "Thank you." Mara felt her chest tighten. "You're welcome." Cole nodded, then walked away. Mara stood there, watching the stars come out overhead. The heat was still unbearable. The ranch was still struggling. But for the first time in weeks, she felt like maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. The water from the pool lasted 3 days. 3 days of relief before Mara made the trip again, her legs already aching from the last journey. She woke before dawn, when the air was still cool and the stars hadn't quite faded from the sky. The ranch was quiet. Everyone still asleep except for one of the hands on night watch. She packed 2 extra canteens this time, along with some dried meat in case the walk took longer than expected. Her boots were worn thin at the soles, and she could feel every rock and rut in the ground as she walked. But she didn't complain. Complaining wouldn't change anything. The sun was just beginning to rise when she reached the creek bed, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that would have been beautiful if she wasn't so tired. She followed the dry path north, her eyes scanning for any signs of water, any green that might indicate moisture beneath the surface. The pool was lower than before, much lower. She could see the waterline on the rocks several inches above where the surface now sat, like a scar showing how much had been lost. The water that remained was cloudy, filled with sediment from the shrinking banks. Mara knelt beside it anyway and began filling the canteens. She worked slowly, carefully, letting the water settle before scooping it up. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than nothing. And nothing was what they'd have in a few days if she didn't take what she could now. When all the containers were full, she sat back on her heels and looked around. The land stretched out in every direction, brown and cracked and unforgiving. She'd never seen anything so harsh, so relentless, but she'd also never felt so needed. Back in all those other towns, she'd been invisible, disposable, someone people looked through rather than at. Here, even with all the hostility and suspicion, at least she mattered. At least what she did made a difference. She stood up, hoisted the canteens, and started the long walk back. By the time she reached the ranch, the sun was high and brutal. Sweat ran down her back, soaking through her dress. Her shoulders ached from the weight of the water, and her feet felt like they were on fire. Cole was waiting by the barn. He looked like he hadn't slept, his eyes red-rimmed, his jaw tight with worry. "You went again," he said. It wasn't a question. "We needed water. I told you it's too dangerous to go alone. And I told you we don't have a choice." Mara set down the canteens, flexing her sore fingers. The rope handles had left deep marks in her palms. "The pool's getting lower. Maybe another week if we're lucky. Maybe less." Cole's jaw tightened even more. She could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. "Then we'll find another way." "There is no other way. Not unless it rains." Mara looked up at the sky, shielding her eyes from the sun. "And that doesn't look likely." They both stared up at the pale, cloudless expanse. It was the same merciless blue it had been for weeks. Not a hint of moisture anywhere, just heat and light, an endless, suffocating sky. Cole looked back at her, and she saw something in his expression she hadn't seen before, something that looked almost like fear, not for himself, but for her. "Next time you go, I'm coming with you. You're needed here. So are you." Mara met his eyes. There was an intensity there that made her chest tighten. "Fine," she said quietly. "Next time." Cole nodded, but he didn't move. He just stood there, looking at her like he was trying to memorize her face. Then he reached out and touched her shoulder, just briefly. "Thank you." Before Mara could respond, he walked away, disappearing into the barn. Mara stood there for a moment, her hand going to the spot where he'd touched her. She could still feel the warmth of his palm through the fabric of her dress. She shook her head, trying to clear it, and picked up the canteens. There was work to do. There was always work to do. The days dragged on, each one hotter than the last. The heat was like a living thing, pressing down on everything, crushing the life out of the land. More cattle died. The men worked themselves to exhaustion, their faces gaunt, their eyes hollow, and the tension kept building. Mara felt it every time she walked into a room, the way conversation stopped, the way eyes followed her, the way Tyler watched her with open contempt, like he was just waiting for her to fail. She tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the work, but it was hard when every meal felt like a test she was barely passing. One afternoon, she was in the kitchen preparing dinner when she heard raised voices outside. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped onto the porch. The men were gathered near the corral, their voices sharp and angry. Even from a distance, she could see the tension in their bodies, the way they stood with fists clenched and shoulders tight. Tyler was in the center of it, his face red, his voice carrying across the yard. "I'm done pretending this is working. We're dying out here, and for what? So the boss can hold on to a piece of land that's already dead?" "Watch your mouth," Davis said, stepping forward. He was the oldest of the crew, a steady presence who rarely raised his voice, but there was an edge to him now. No, I'm tired of watching my mouth. I'm tired of eating scraps. I'm tired of working myself to death for nothing. Tyler pointed toward the house, toward where Mara stood frozen on the porch. And I'm tired of pretending that woman is helping anything. She's the reason we're in this mess. That's not true, another man said, but his voice lacked conviction. He looked uncomfortable, his eyes darting between Tyler and the others. Isn't it? We were managing fine before she showed up. Now look at us. Starving, no water, cattle dying every day. Tyler's voice rose, getting louder with each word. She's bad luck, plain and simple, and the sooner the boss sees it, the better off we'll all be. Mara felt her chest go tight. She wanted to walk away to go inside and pretend she hadn't heard, but her feet wouldn't move. She stood there, exposed, as every word hit her like a physical blow. Cole appeared from the barn, his expression dark as a thundercloud. He moved with purpose, his long strides eating up the distance between him and the gathered men. That's enough. Tyler spun around, but he didn't back down. Boss, we need to talk. No, you need to shut up and get back to work. I'm not doing this anymore. Tyler threw his hat on the ground, the gesture dramatic and final. I'm done. Done with this ranch, done with the heat, and done with her. He pointed directly at Mara, and she felt every eye turn toward her. Cole took a step forward, and Mara saw his hands curl into fists. For a moment, she thought he might actually hit Tyler. You got something to say? Say it to me. Not her. I just did. Tyler's voice was cold, flat. Fire her, before this place falls apart completely. She's not the problem. Then what is? Because from where I'm standing, everything went to hell the day she walked onto this property. Tyler looked around at the other men, trying to rally support. Come on, you all see it. Things were bad before, but they weren't this bad, not until she showed up. A few of the men shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke up. No one defended her. Cole's hands clenched tighter. Mara could see his knuckles going white. You want to leave? Leave. But if you stay, you do your job and keep your mouth shut about things you don't understand. You're choosing her over us. Tyler's voice was incredulous. I'm choosing to run my ranch the way I see fit. You got a problem with that? The two men faced each other, neither backing down. The air between them crackled with tension, like lightning about to strike. The rest of the crew stood frozen, watching. Finally, Tyler bent down and picked up his hat. He slapped it against his leg, sending up a cloud of dust. You're making a mistake. That's my business. Tyler looked at Mara one last time, his expression full of contempt and something else. Something that looked almost like hatred. Then he turned and walked toward the bunkhouse, his boots striking the ground hard with each step. The other men slowly dispersed, casting uncertain glances at Cole and Mara. No one said anything. They just drifted away, back to their work, leaving an uncomfortable silence in their wake. Cole stood there for a moment longer, his chest heaving, his jaw still tight. Then he walked over to where Mara was standing on the porch. You all right? He asked. I should be asking you that. I'm fine. You don't look fine. Mara tried to keep her voice steady, but it shook slightly. Cole almost smiled at that, just the ghost of it at the corner of his mouth. You say that a lot. Because it's true a lot. They stood in silence for a moment. Mara could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, could feel the trembling in her hands that she was trying to hide. Then Cole said, his voice low and firm, Don't listen to Tyler. He's wrong. Is he? The question came out before Mara could stop it. Yeah, he is. Cole looked at her directly, his gray eyes serious. You've kept us fed when there was nothing to eat. You found water when we were about to run dry. You've worked harder than anyone here, and you've done it without complaining once. So don't let him make you think otherwise. Mara felt something catch in her throat. She wanted to say thank you, but the words wouldn't come out. They stuck there, tangled with all the other emotions she didn't know how to name. So she just nodded. Cole seemed to understand. He nodded back, then turned and walked away, his shoulders still tense, his hands still clenched. Mara went back inside, but she couldn't focus on cooking. She just stood at the window, watching the men work, watching the sun beat down on the dying land, and wondering how much longer they could all keep going like this. The next morning, Tyler was gone. Mara noticed his absence immediately when she served breakfast. His usual spot at the table was empty, a gap in the row of weathered faces that felt somehow larger than it should. "Where's Tyler?" she asked Davis, who was eating slowly, methodically, like a man who'd learned to make every bite count. "Left before dawn, took his gear and his horse." Davis didn't look up from his plate. "He say where he was going?" "Nope, just left." Davis finally raised his eyes to meet hers. "Good riddance, if you ask me." Mara looked at Cole, who was sitting at the head of the table. He was eating slowly too, his face unreadable. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept well. "Did you know?" she asked him. Cole glanced up. "Knew he was thinking about it. Figured it was only a matter of time." "You didn't try to stop him?" "No point. Man wants to leave, he's gonna leave. Can't chain someone to a place they don't want to be." Cole set down his fork. "We'll manage without him." But Mara could see the worry in his eyes, the way his gaze kept drifting to the empty chair. They were already short-handed. Losing Tyler made everything harder, even if his attitude had been poison. Still, part of her was relieved. At least now she wouldn't have to deal with his constant hostility, his sneers, the way he made her feel small every time he looked at her. That relief lasted exactly 4 days. On the 4th night after Tyler left, Mara was checking the snares near the creek. The sun had just set, painting the sky in deep purples and reds. It was the coolest part of the day, the only time she could be outside without feeling like she was being baked alive. She was crouched down, examining one of the traps, when she heard something. Footsteps. Not animal footsteps. Human ones. Deliberate and heavy, crunching on the dry grass. Mara froze, her heart immediately kicking into a faster rhythm. She listened, trying to determine which direction they were coming from. The footsteps were getting closer. "Who's there?" she called out, trying to keep her voice steady. No answer. Mara slowly stood up, her eyes scanning the darkening landscape. The rocks and scrub brush created dozens of shadows, any one of which could be hiding someone. The footsteps stopped. The silence was somehow worse than the sound had been. Mara looked around for something to defend herself with. She spotted a thick branch on the ground, about the length of her arm. She picked it up, testing its weight. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. "I know you're out there," she said, louder this time. "Show yourself." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Tyler stepped out from behind a cluster of rocks, and Mara's blood ran cold. He looked different. Worse. His clothes were dirty, his face unshaven, his eyes wild in a way that made her instinctively take a step back. "What are you doing here?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Came back for what's mine." His voice was rough, like he hadn't had water in days. "You took everything when you left." Tyler smiled, but there was nothing friendly about it. It was the smile of a man who had nothing left to lose. "Not everything." He started walking toward her, slow and deliberate. Mara raised the branch. "Stay back." "Or what? You gonna hit me with a stick?" Tyler laughed, but it was a broken sound. "You really think you belong here, don't you? You really think the boss cares about you?" "I think you need to leave. Now." "I will, but first we're gonna have a little talk about how you ruined everything." He took another step forward, and Mara could smell him now, sweat and dirt and desperation. "I didn't ruin anything. You did that yourself." "No." Tyler's voice turned hard. "You came here and you poisoned everything. You got inside the boss's head, made him think he needed you, made him choose you over his own men. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened." Tyler was close now, too close. "And now I've got nothing. No job, no money, nowhere to go. Because of you." Mara swung the branch. Tyler caught it mid-swing, his reflexes faster than she'd expected. He yanked it out of her hands and threw it aside. Then he grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "You cost me everything," he hissed, his face inches from hers. His breath was sour. "You cost me my job, my home, my—" He didn't finish. Cole appeared out of nowhere, slamming into Tyler like a freight train. Both men went down hard, hitting the ground with a heavy thud that knocked the air from their lungs. They grappled in the dirt, rolling. each trying to gain the upper hand. Tyler threw a wild punch. Cole blocked it and landed one of his own, connecting with Tyler's jaw with a sickening crack that Mara heard even from several feet away. Tyler staggered back, blood running from his mouth, dark in the fading light. He touched his lip, looked at the blood on his fingers, then looked at Cole with pure rage. "This isn't over," he spat, blood spraying with the words. Cole stood up, his fists still clenched, his chest heaving. "Yes, it is. You come near her again, you come near this ranch again, and I swear I will kill you. You understand me?" Tyler stared at him, something wild and broken flickering in his eyes. For a moment, Mara thought he might try to fight more. But then he seemed to deflate, all the anger draining out of him and leaving only emptiness. He turned and ran, disappearing into the darkness, his footsteps fading until there was only silence. Cole stood there for a long moment, breathing hard, his knuckles bloody. Then he turned to Mara. "You hurt?" "No, I'm fine." But her voice shook, and she couldn't stop the trembling in her hands. "You sure?" "Yeah." Cole looked in the direction Tyler had gone, his jaw tight, his whole body still coiled with tension. "He comes back again. I'll kill him. I mean it." Mara believed him. She'd never heard that tone in his voice before. Flat, certain, final. They walked back to the ranch in silence. Mara's arm throbbed where Tyler had grabbed her, and she knew there would be bruises tomorrow. Dark ones. When they reached the house, Cole stopped on the porch. He turned to face her, and in the lamplight spilling from the window, she could see the concern etched into every line of his face. "You shouldn't go out alone anymore," he said. "Not until we know he's really gone. I can't just stay inside all the time. There's work to do." "I'm not asking you to stay inside. I'm asking you to be careful." Cole's voice was firm, but not unkind. "He's desperate, and desperate men do stupid, dangerous things, things they wouldn't normally do." Mara nodded slowly. Her arm hurt. Her hands were still shaking. "All right." "Good." Cole started to walk away, then stopped. He turned back to her, and for a long moment, he just looked at her. Really looked at her, like he was trying to figure something out. "What?" Mara asked. "Nothing, just..." He paused. "Thank you. For everything you've done, for staying when most people would have left. You already thanked me." "I know, but I mean it. More than I can say." His voice was rough, almost hoarse. Mara felt her chest tighten. "You're welcome." Cole nodded and walked away, his boots heavy on the wooden boards. Mara stood there for a long time, staring up at the stars that were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. Her arm still ached where Tyler had grabbed her. Her hands were finally starting to steady. But she wasn't scared. She was angry. Angry that Tyler had come back. Angry that he'd tried to hurt her. Angry that she'd let him get close enough to grab her. But underneath the anger was something else, something that felt almost like determination. She wasn't going anywhere. Not because of Tyler. Not because of anyone. This was her place now, whether the world liked it or not. 2 days later, the first cattle disappeared. Cole discovered it in the morning when he went to check the herd like he did every day at dawn. 5 head were missing, and the fence had been cut in several places, the wire hanging loose and useless. He came back to the house, his face like stone, his movements sharp and angry. "Tyler..." "You're sure?" Mara asked, though she already knew the answer. Who else would it be? Who else knows this ranch well enough to know where to cut the fence, which cattle to take? Cole grabbed his rifle from the rack by the door, checking it with practiced efficiency. "He's trying to bleed me dry. Take the cattle, sell them somewhere, make up for the wages he thinks I owe him." "What are you going to do?" "Find him. Get them back." Cole's voice was cold, harder than Mara had ever heard it. "Cole, he could be anywhere by now. He's had hours." "I don't care. Those cattle are all we have left." Cole checked the rifle again, his hands moving fast and sure. "If I lose them, the ranch is done. Finished. We won't make it through the winter." Mara grabbed his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. "Then let me come with you." "No. You can't go alone." "I'll take Davis." "Davis is 50 years old and has a bad knee. You need someone who can keep up, who can move fast if you have to." Mara held his gaze. You need me. Cole looked at her, really looked at her, and she could see the conflict in his eyes. The need to keep her safe versus the need for help. The desire to protect her versus the knowledge that she was right. Finally, he nodded. All right, but you stay close and do exactly what I say. No arguments. Deal. They left within the hour, following the tracks Tyler had left behind. He hadn't bothered to cover them, which told Mara he either didn't care or didn't think anyone would follow. Either way, it was a mistake. He was wrong on both counts. The tracks led north, toward a rocky area where the land turned rough and uneven, full of gullies and outcroppings. Cole moved quickly, his eyes scanning the ground, reading signs Mara couldn't see. A broken branch here, a disturbed rock there, marks in the dust that told him which way Tyler had gone. How far ahead is he? She asked, trying to keep her breathing steady. They'd been walking fast for over an hour. Few hours, maybe. He's moving slow with the cattle. They don't want to go, so he's having to push them. Do you think he knows we're following? Probably, but he's counting on us giving up, counting on me deciding it's not worth the risk. Cole's jaw tightened. He's wrong. They kept going, the sun climbing higher, the heat building like it always did. Mara's legs ached, her feet hurt, her throat was dry. But she didn't complain. She just kept walking, keeping pace with Cole, refusing to slow him down. After a few more hours, they found the cattle. They were penned in a makeshift corral near a dried-up riverbed, looking thin and exhausted and miserable. The corral was crude, just some rope and branches, but it was enough to hold them for now. But Tyler was nowhere in sight. Cole approached carefully, his rifle ready, his eyes scanning the rocks around them. Mara followed, her heart pounding, her eyes doing the same. Where is he? She whispered. Close. Cole didn't take his eyes off the surrounding area. He wouldn't leave them unguarded, not after going through all this trouble to take them. As if on cue, a shot rang out. The bullet hit the ground near Cole's feet, kicking up a spray of dirt and rock. Cole grabbed Mara and pulled her behind a boulder, his body shielding hers. Tyler! Cole shouted. This ends now. Tyler's voice echoed from somewhere in the rocks, bouncing off stones so Mara couldn't tell where it was coming from. You should have stayed at the ranch, boss. This doesn't concern you anymore. Those are my cattle. Not anymore. I'm taking what you owe me, what you all owe me. I don't owe you anything. You quit. Another shot. This one closer, the bullet pinging off the rock they were hiding behind. Cole looked at Mara, his face serious. Stay here. Where are you going? To end this. Before Mara could argue, before she could tell him it was too dangerous, Cole was moving. He circled around the rocks, using the terrain for cover, moving with a speed and grace that surprised her. Mara stayed behind the boulder like he'd told her to, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She could hear voices, Cole and Tyler shouting at each other, but couldn't make out the words over the blood rushing in her ears. Then she heard the sound of a scuffle. Bodies hitting rock. Grunts of pain and effort. Mara couldn't stand it. She couldn't just sit there while Cole was fighting. She left the boulder and ran toward the sound, her feet slipping on loose gravel. She found them near the riverbed. Cole had Tyler pinned against a rock, his forearm across Tyler's throat, pressing hard. Tyler's rifle was on the ground several feet away, out of reach. Tyler's face was red, his eyes wild and bulging. He clawed at Cole's arm, trying to break free, but Cole held firm. It's over, Cole said, his voice cold and flat and final. Tyler's face twisted with rage. You're going to let her destroy you. You're too blind to see it. She's going to take everything, and you're just going to let her. The only person destroying anything is you. You did this to yourself. Tyler tried to shove Cole off, using his legs for leverage, but Cole was stronger. He held firm, his arm not budging an inch. You come near my ranch again, you come near her again, and I swear I will put you in the ground. You understand me? Tyler glared at him, hatred burning in his eyes. Then, slowly, he nodded. Cole let him go. Tyler stumbled back, coughing, his hand going to his throat. He gasped for air, his chest heaving. Get out of here, Cole said, and take the horse you stole, but the cattle stay. Tyler looked at the cattle, then at Cole, then at Mara. For a moment she thought he might try something, might make one last desperate move, But then he just spat on the ground and walked away, his shoulders hunched, his head down. He looked defeated, broken. They watched him disappear into the rocks, his footsteps fading until there was nothing but silence and the quiet lowing of the cattle. Cole stood there for a long moment, breathing hard, his hands still clenched into fists. Then he turned to Mara, and his expression softened slightly. "You all right?" "I'm fine. Are you?" Cole nodded. He picked up Tyler's rifle and threw it into the riverbed, where it clattered against the rocks. Then he walked over to the cattle and started checking them over, making sure they weren't injured. Mara helped him release them from the makeshift corral, and together they started herding them back toward the ranch. It was slow work. The cattle were tired and stubborn, not wanting to move, but they managed, taking turns pushing them forward, guiding them home. It took most of the day. By the time they got back to the ranch, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of red and orange that reminded Mara of fire. The other men came out to help get the cattle settled. Davis looked at Cole, his eyes asking the question he didn't voice. "Tyler?" he said simply. "Gone," Cole said. "For good this time." Davis nodded. He didn't ask for details. Didn't need to. That night, after the men had eaten and gone to bed, after the ranch had settled into quiet, Mara found Cole sitting on the porch. He was staring out at the dark land, a bottle of whiskey beside him. He'd poured a glass but hadn't touched it. She sat down next to him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "You think he'll come back?" she asked. "No, he knows better now, knows I meant what I said." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds. Crickets, the distant call of a coyote, the soft movement of cattle in the pen. Then Cole said, his voice quiet, "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For bringing you into this, for putting you in danger, for—" He stopped, searching for words. "For not protecting you better." "You didn't bring me into anything. I chose to stay. I chose to fight." Mara looked at him. "And you did protect me. You've been protecting me since the day I got here." Cole looked at her, and in the lamplight from the window, she could see every line of exhaustion in his face, every shadow of worry. "Why?" "Why what?" "Why did you stay? You could have left a dozen times, could have walked away when things got hard. But you didn't." His voice was genuinely curious. Why? Mara thought about it, really thought about it. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was just passing through. I felt like I was part of something real, something that mattered. Cole was quiet for a moment. Then he said, his voice rough, "You are. Part of something." Mara felt her breath catch. "Yeah?" "Yeah." They looked at each other, and Mara saw something in Cole's eyes that made her heart skip. Something warm and deep and intense. Something that looked almost like... But before she could finish the thought, before she could put a name to what she was seeing, Cole stood up. He moved abruptly, like he needed to put distance between them. "You should get some rest," he said, not looking at her. "Tomorrow's going to be another long day." "Right, yeah." Mara stood up too, feeling suddenly awkward, suddenly uncertain. "Good night, Mara." "Good night, Cole." She went inside, but sleep didn't come easily. She lay in her small bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over. The way he'd looked at her, the way her heart had responded. She was in dangerous territory now. Not the physical danger of Tyler or the heat or the drought. This was something else entirely. Something that scared her more than any of that. The heat finally broke 3 days later. Mara woke to the sound of thunder, deep and rolling, like the earth itself was groaning. She sat up quickly, her heart leaping with something that felt like hope. She listened, hardly daring to breathe. Then she heard it again, louder this time, closer. She ran to the window and looked out, pressing her face against the glass. Clouds. Dark, heavy clouds rolling across the sky like a gray ocean, blocking out the stars. Real clouds, thick with moisture, not the thin wisps that had taunted them for weeks. And then, as she watched with her breath fogging the glass, the first drops of rain began to fall. Small at first, just a few drops hitting the dust, making dark spots on the parched ground. Then more and more. until it was really, truly raining. Mara laughed. She couldn't help it. The sound bubbled up from deep in her chest, surprised and joyful and disbelieving. She ran outside in her nightgown, barefoot, not caring who saw her or what they thought. She stood in the rain as it came down harder and harder, soaking through her nightgown, plastering her hair to her head, running down her face like tears. The men poured out of the bunkhouse, whooping and hollering like children. Davis threw his hat in the air. Another man started dancing, his arms spread wide. Cole came out of the barn, his face turned up to the sky, water running down his face and neck. His shirt was getting soaked, clinging to his shoulders, but he didn't seem to care. He looked over at Mara and smiled. It was the first time she'd ever seen him smile. Really smile, not just that ghost of a smile at the corner of his mouth. And it changed everything. It lit up his whole face, made him look younger, made him look like a different person entirely, like someone who still remembered how to be happy. Mara smiled back, feeling her own face stretch wide with joy. The rain lasted through the night and into the next day. It came down in sheets, drumming on the roof, filling every barrel and bucket and container they had. The dry creek bed began to fill, water rushing over rocks that hadn't been wet in months. By the time it stopped, the land looked different. The dust had been washed away, revealing brown earth that would soon turn green. The air smelled fresh, clean, full of promise. The cattle drank deeply, their strength returning with each gulp. The men moved with new energy. The crushing weight of desperation finally lifted from their shoulders, and the tension that had held the ranch in a chokehold for weeks began to ease. Mara stood on the porch the morning after the rain, looking out at the transformed landscape. Everything looked new, hopeful, like maybe they really would survive this after all. The men no longer avoided her after that. The rain seemed to have washed away more than just the dust. It had washed away the last of their suspicion, their resentment. They nodded when she brought food. Some even said thank you, their voices gruff but genuine. Davis started helping her carry water from the well without being asked. Another man brought her some wild herbs he'd found, thinking she might want them for cooking. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was acceptance. And Cole looked at her differently now, like he was seeing her for the first time. Really seeing her, not just as the cook or the woman who'd shown up and refused to leave, but as someone who mattered, someone important. One evening, as Mara was cleaning up after dinner, he came into the kitchen. He stood in the doorway for a moment, like he wasn't sure he should be there. "Need any help?" he asked. Mara looked at him in surprise. "Since when do you help with dishes?" "Since now." He picked up a towel and started drying plates, his movements careful and deliberate. They worked in silence for a while, the only sound the clinking of dishes and the distant rumble of thunder. More rain was coming. The land was finally getting what it needed. "Finally," Cole said, setting down a plate. "I was wrong about you." Mara looked at him. "What do you mean?" "When you first showed up, I thought you wouldn't last a week. I thought you were just another person looking for an easy place to land, someone who'd leave as soon as things got hard." He paused, his hand still on the dish towel. "I was wrong. You're stronger than anyone I've ever met." Mara felt her throat tighten. "I'm not that strong." "Yes, you are. You just don't see it yet." Cole turned to face her fully. "You held this place together when it was falling apart. You kept us fed, kept us going, refused to give up even when everyone was against you. That's not just strong, that's—" He stopped, searching for the word. "That's remarkable." Mara didn't know what to say. She stood there, dish soap dripping from her hands, staring at him. Cole took a step closer. "Mara." The door banged open. Davis stood there, out of breath, his face flushed. "Boss, you need to come quick. Riders coming from town, and they don't look friendly." Cole's expression hardened immediately, all the softness draining out of it. He looked at Mara one more time, something unfinished hanging in the air between them. Then he followed Davis outside. Mara stood in the kitchen, her heart pounding, her hands still dripping, wondering what was coming next. Whatever it was, she had a feeling it wasn't going to be good. She dried her hands quickly and followed them out. Mara stepped out onto the porch, drying her hands on her apron. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the yard. She could see the dust cloud rising in the distance, getting closer with each passing second. 5 riders. maybe 6. It was hard to tell through the haze. Cole stood in the middle of the yard, his arms crossed over his chest, his stance wide and solid. Davis was beside him, and the other 2 hands had come out of the barn, all of them forming a line, a wall between the ranch and whatever was coming. Mara walked down the porch steps slowly, her eyes fixed on the approaching riders. Her stomach was knotted tight, a sick feeling spreading through her chest. She knew who it was before they even got close enough to see clearly. Harrison. The riders slowed as they reached the gate, their horses snorting and stamping. The man in front was older, maybe 60, with silver hair slicked back from a weathered face. He wore a vest with a gold watch chain, polished boots, the kind of clothes that said he had money and wanted everyone to know it. Behind him were 4 younger men, all carrying rifles. They sat their horses with the casual confidence of men who'd never been told no. Harrison dismounted with practiced ease, brushing dust from his vest like this was just another social call, like he hadn't brought armed men to someone else's property. "Cole Mercer," he said, his voice carrying across the yard. "Harrison." Cole's voice was flat, cold. "What do you want?" "Just came to check on things. Heard you've been having some trouble out here." Harrison's eyes scanned the ranch, taking in the worn buildings, the cattle that were finally starting to fill out again, the men standing behind Cole. Then his gaze landed on Mara. He stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Not hostile exactly, but not friendly either. Just cold. Assessing. Like she was livestock he was considering buying. Then he looked back at Cole. "That her?" he asked. "That's none of your business." "It is when it affects the whole town." Harrison took a step forward, his boots crunching on the gravel. "People are talking, Cole. They're saying you've got a woman living out here. No ring on her finger. No family, just you and your men." "So?" Cole's jaw tightened. "So it doesn't look right. It raises questions, concerns. What people say isn't my concern. It should be. This town has standards, moral standards. We don't tolerate—" Harrison paused, choosing his words carefully. "We don't tolerate improper arrangements." Cole's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "What happens on my land is my business. Not yours. Not the town's. Mine. You're wrong about that. This ranch is part of Iron Ridge. What you do here reflects on all of us." Harrison's voice took on a lecturing tone, like he was explaining something simple to a child. "The town council won't stand for this kind of thing. We have reputations to maintain." "Then don't look." One of the younger men behind Harrison shifted in his saddle, his hand moving toward the rifle strapped to it. Cole noticed. So did Davis, who took a half step forward, his own hand moving to the gun at his hip, the tension stretched tight as a wire ready to snap. Harrison raised a hand, stopping his men without looking at them. "Easy now. Nobody needs to do anything rash." He turned his attention back to Cole. "You're a stubborn man, Cole. Always have been. Your daddy was the same way, but stubbornness only gets you so far." He glanced at Mara again, and this time there was something in his expression, something that looked like disgust masked as concern. Especially when you're protecting someone who doesn't deserve it. The words hit Mara like a slap. She felt heat rise in her chest, anger mixing with shame in a way that made her feel sick. Before she could stop herself, before she could think about whether it was smart or safe, she stepped forward. "You don't know anything about me," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. Harrison looked at her like she was something he'd found stuck to the bottom of his boot. "I know enough. I know you showed up out of nowhere. I know you've been causing trouble ever since." The only trouble I've caused is making sure people don't starve. Is that what you call it?" Harrison's smile was cold, cruel. "That's not what Tyler says." Mara's blood went cold. "Tyler? He came through town a few days ago, stopped at the saloon, had a few drinks, started talking." Harrison rocked back on his heels, enjoying this. "Told us some interesting things about what's been happening out here, about how you've been manipulating Cole, taking advantage of his loneliness, worming your way into a position you have no right to hold." "That's a lie." Mara's voice shook, but she kept it steady. "Everything Tyler said is a lie." "Is it?" Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've managed to get yourself a pretty comfortable situation. Roof over your head, meals provided, a man to protect you. Harrison shook his head slowly. All you had to do was make him think he needed you. And now you've got Cole defending you like you're something precious. That's enough. Cole's voice cut through like a knife. Harrison turned to him. Is it? Because I'm just saying what everyone in town is thinking, what they're all too polite to say to your face. I don't care what they're thinking. You should, because when people talk, things get complicated. For everyone. Harrison gestured to his men. The council sent me here to deliver a message. Clean up your situation, or we'll do it for you. Cole moved so fast Mara barely saw it. One moment he was standing still, the next he was inches from Harrison's face, his hand gripping the older man's vest. You insult her again, Cole said quietly, his voice deadly calm. And you're going to have a bigger problem than you know how to handle. Understood? Harrison didn't flinch, but something flickered in his eyes. Fear, maybe. Or respect. Take your hands off me, Mercer. Cole held on for another moment, then released him with a slight shove. Harrison stumbled back a step, smoothing his vest. You're making a mistake, Harrison said, his voice tight. The town council has power. We can make your life very difficult. You already are. This is nothing. We can cut off your credit at the store. Refuse to do business with you. Make it so no one in town will sell you anything. Harrison's smile returned, colder than before. How long do you think you'll last out here with no supplies? As long as I have to. Harrison studied him for a long moment, then shook his head. Stubborn fool, just like your father. And look where that got him. Cole's expression went dark, dangerous. Get off my land, now. We're going. But think about what I said, Cole. Think about whether this woman is worth losing everything you've worked for. Harrison mounted his horse, settling into the saddle. Think about whether she's worth becoming an outcast. He wheeled his horse around and rode away, his men following. They disappeared down the road, leaving nothing but dust and the sick feeling in Mara's stomach. Cole stood there, his fists still clenched, his jaw working like he was grinding his teeth to dust. Boss, Davis said quietly. You all right? Fine. The word came out clipped, hard. What are we going to do? What we've been doing. Work the ranch, take care of business. Cole turned to look at his men. Harrison doesn't scare me. The town council doesn't scare me. We'll manage. But Mara could see the worry in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. Harrison had hit him where it hurt, threatened his ability to provide, to keep the ranch running. And they all knew he wasn't bluffing. The men dispersed slowly, going back to their work. Davis gave Mara a sympathetic look before heading to the barn. Cole started to walk away, but Mara stopped him. Cole. He turned, and she could see the exhaustion in every line of his face. I should leave, she said quietly. What? You heard Harrison. The town is against me, against us. And as long as I'm here, they're going to make your life miserable. I don't care what they think. You should. You have to live with these people. You have to trade with them, work with them. And if they turn on you because of me, then let them turn. Cole's voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. I'm not going to run my life based on what a bunch of small-minded people think is proper. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. Cole took a step toward her. You think I care what Harrison thinks? You think I care what the town council says? They've never helped me, never given me anything. Why should I care what they say now? Because it's going to get worse. You know it will. They're not going to let this go. Cole was quiet for a moment, his eyes searching her face. Maybe, but that's my problem, not yours. It is my problem. I'm the reason this is happening. You're the reason this ranch is still standing. Cole's voice was intense now, almost angry. You're the reason we survived the drought. You're the reason the men didn't walk away when things got bad. You found food when there was none. You found water when the wells ran dry. You did things I didn't think were possible. He paused, taking a breath. So don't you dare stand there and tell me you should leave. Don't you dare make this decision for me. Mara felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them away, refusing to let them fall. I don't want to be the thing that destroys you. You won't be. You don't know that. Cole stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes, the lines that fanned out from the corners. Listen to me. I've spent the last 5 years barely surviving, just holding on, day after day, waiting for something to change, waiting for a reason to keep going. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer. And then you showed up, and everything did change. For the better. You gave this place life again. You gave me... He stopped, looking away. You gave me something to fight for besides just survival. Mara's throat was so tight she could barely breathe. Why are you doing this? Because... Cole stopped, took a breath, started again. Because you matter. To this place. To the men. To me. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Mara's heart was pounding so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. She wanted to say something, wanted to tell him that he mattered to her too, that somewhere along the way she'd stopped just trying to survive and started living, started feeling things she thought she'd forgotten how to feel. But the words stuck in her throat, too big and too frightening to say out loud. So instead she just nodded. Cole seemed to understand. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand, his rough palm warm against hers. They stood like that for a long moment, hands clasped, the setting sun painting everything gold. Then Cole let go and stepped back. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be rough. How do you know? Because Harrison doesn't make threats he doesn't plan to follow through on. Cole's jaw tightened again. But whatever he does, we'll handle it, together. He walked away, leaving Mara standing in the yard, her hand still warm from his touch. She stood there for a long time after he was gone, staring at the horizon, trying to slow her racing heart. Something had shifted between them, something fundamental had changed, and she wasn't sure if that terrified her or gave her hope. Maybe both. The next day, 3 of the ranch hands quit. They came to Cole in the morning just after breakfast. Mara was in the kitchen washing dishes when she heard them talking outside, their voices low and apologetic. She moved to the window, listening. We can't stay, boss, one of them was saying. His name was Jim, a younger guy who'd been with the ranch for about a year. We got families in town. If we keep working here, they're going to suffer for it. Harrison got to you, Cole said. It wasn't a question. Jim looked uncomfortable, his hat in his hands, turning it over and over. He came by our houses last night, told us what the council decided, said if we keep working for you, we're not welcome in town anymore. Can't buy supplies, can't get credit at the store, can't... He stopped, swallowing hard. Can't what? Cole's voice was quiet. Can't use the doctor. If our families get sick, if something happens... Jim's voice broke slightly. I got a wife and 2 kids, boss. I can't risk them like that. The other 2 men nodded, their faces miserable but resolute. Cole was silent for a long moment. Mar could see his jaw working, could see the tension in his shoulders. But when he spoke, his voice was calm, understanding, even. I get it. You got to do what's right for your families. We're sorry, boss. We really are. I know. Cole pulled some money from his pocket, counted it out. This is what I owe you, plus a little extra. You earned it. The men took the money, mumbling their thanks, their eyes not quite meeting his. For what it's worth, Jim said quietly, we don't agree with what Harrison's doing. We don't think Miss Vance is the problem. We think he's just using her as an excuse. I know that too. Cole's voice was tired. But knowing it doesn't change anything. The men nodded and walked away to gather their things. Within an hour they were gone, riding down the road toward town, leaving the ranch even more short-handed than before. That left Cole with Davis and 1 other hand named Pete. 3 men total to run a ranch that needed at least 6. Mara found Cole in the barn afterward, sitting on a hay bale, his head in his hands. Cole. He looked up. Yeah. I'm sorry. Not your fault. But there was no conviction in his voice. It is. If I left, they'd still leave. Harrison would find another reason. Another way to squeeze me. Cole stood up, brushing hay from his pants. This isn't about you, Mara. It's about him wanting my land. He's wanted it for years, wanted to expand his holdings, create some kind of empire. This is just his excuse to make a move. What are you going to do? Keep working, keep fighting. Cole looked at her, and despite everything, despite the exhaustion and frustration, his eyes were steady. Unless you're planning to leave too. No, I'm not leaving. Good. Something in his expression softened. Then we'll figure it out. We always do. But figuring it out turned out to be harder than either of them expected. Over the next week, things in town got progressively worse. The general store refused to sell to anyone from the Mercer Ranch. The owner, a thin, nervous man who'd always been friendly before, wouldn't even let Mara through the door. "I'm sorry," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Harrison's orders. I can't afford to cross him." The blacksmith turned Cole away when he tried to get a horse shod, just shook his head and went back to his forge, the message clear. Even the saloon wouldn't serve Davis when he rode in, hoping to buy some supplies on the side. The bartender, a man who'd known Davis for 20 years, just pointed to the door. "You know I like you, Davis, but I got a business to run. Can't have you here." Word spread fast through the small community. The town had made its decision. Cole Mercer was persona non grata, and anyone associated with him was too. Mara watched it happen, watched Cole's jaw get tighter and tighter, his shoulders more tense with each rejection. He didn't complain, didn't rage against the unfairness of it. He just kept working, kept pushing forward like he could will the ranch into survival through sheer stubbornness alone. But Mara knew it couldn't last. They were running out of supplies, running out of options, running out of time. The coffee ran out first, then the sugar, then the flour. Mara stretched what they had as far as it would go, making meals from whatever she could find or grow or catch. But it was getting harder. The men were starting to lose weight again, their faces becoming gaunt, their movements slower. They were back where they'd started, barely surviving, barely hanging on. And it was all because of her. Mara lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, the guilt eating at her. She'd tried so hard to help, tried so hard to be useful, and instead she'd brought disaster down on all of them. Maybe Tyler had been right. Maybe she was bad luck. Maybe everyone would be better off if she just disappeared. Then, on a hot afternoon, 2 weeks after Harrison's visit, Mara made a decision. She was tired of hiding, tired of letting other people control the narrative, tired of being talked about like she wasn't even a person, just a problem to be solved. If they wanted to judge her, fine, but they were going to do it to her face. She changed into her best dress, which wasn't saying much, just the least worn of her options. She pinned up her hair. She looked at herself in the small mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked older, harder, but also stronger somehow. She walked into town. She knew it was a risk, knew she'd probably face hostility, maybe worse, but she couldn't just sit at the ranch anymore, passive and hidden, while other people decided her fate. The street was busy when she arrived, the afternoon bringing people out for errands and socializing. But the moment she stepped onto the main road, the noise died. People stopped and stared. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Eyes followed her like she was some kind of dangerous animal that had wandered into civilization. Mara kept her head up and kept walking, her heart pounding but her steps steady. She went to the general store first. The owner was behind the counter, organizing some canned goods. He looked up as she entered, and his expression went from neutral to cold in an instant. "We're closed," he said. "Your sign says you're open until 5. It's 3 o'clock. Not to you." Mara walked up to the counter, refusing to be intimidated. "I need supplies." "I told you, we're closed." "Why? Because Harrison told you to be?" The man's face flushed. "That's got nothing to do with it." "Doesn't it?" Mara leaned on the counter, keeping her voice calm even though her hands were shaking. "You've been selling to the Mercer Ranch for years, and now, suddenly, you won't. What changed? You know what changed. Say it. Say it to my face instead of hiding behind Harrison's orders." The man looked uncomfortable, his eyes darting to the window like he was hoping someone would come rescue him. "Look, I don't have anything against you personally, but you're causing trouble, and I can't afford to be associated with trouble. I'm not causing trouble, I'm just trying to live. just trying to work and earn my keep. Then live somewhere else. Mara felt anger flare in her chest, hot and sharp. No. What? I said no. I'm not leaving. And you can tell Harrison that. You can tell the whole town. She turned and walked out before he could respond, slamming the door hard enough to make the glass rattle. She could feel eyes on her as she walked down the street, could hear the whispers growing louder, spreading like wildfire. She didn't care anymore. She walked to the center of town where a small crowd had gathered near the saloon. They were talking, laughing, going about their day. But as she approached, they all turned to look at her. The laughter died. Mara stopped in the middle of the street, looked at them, at all of them. "You all want to talk about me?" she said, her voice loud and clear, carrying across the sudden silence. "Then talk. But do it to my face, not behind my back like cowards." The crowd went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. A woman near the front, middle-aged with a pinched face and hard eyes, spoke up first. "You've got some nerve showing your face here." "Why? Because I work for a living? Because I didn't ask your permission to exist? Because you're living in sin with a man who isn't your husband." The woman's voice was full of righteous indignation. Mara laughed. It came out harsh, bitter, not sounding like her at all. "Is that what you think? That I'm Cole Mercer's mistress? That I'm warming his bed in exchange for room and board? What else would you be?" "His cook, his employee, a person trying to survive just like everyone else." Mara looked around at the crowd, meeting as many eyes as would meet hers. But you can't imagine that, can you? You can't imagine a woman being anything other than someone's wife or someone's daughter or someone's property. "That's not—" the woman started. "Yes, it is." Mara's voice shook, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop now. "You see me and you assume the worst because that's easier than asking the truth. You listen to Tyler's lies because they confirm what you already believe, that I'm worthless, that I don't belong, that I'm taking something that isn't mine." "You are!" someone shouted from the back of the crowd. "You're taking advantage of Cole Mercer." "I'm keeping his ranch alive," Mara shouted back, her voice cracking with emotion. "While you all sat in town, safe and comfortable, judging people you don't even know, I was out there finding food, finding water, doing whatever it took to make sure those men didn't starve to death." She paused, breathing hard, her hands clenched into fists. "I worked harder than I've ever worked in my life. I gave everything I had. And you want to punish me for it? You want to destroy a man's livelihood because he had the decency to give me a chance when no one else would?" The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some people looked away. Others crossed their arms defensively. Harrison pushed through to the front, his face red with anger. "You're out of line, young lady." "No, you're out of line." Mara turned to face him fully, no longer afraid. "You want Cole's land. Everyone knows it. Everyone in this town knows what you're doing, and you're using me as an excuse to get it. You're turning everyone against him because he won't sell to you, because he won't bend to your will." "That's absurd." "Is it? Then why did you threaten his men? Why did you tell every business in town not to sell to him? Why are you doing everything you can to strangle his operation?" Harrison's expression went cold and hard. "Because he's harboring a woman of questionable morals, and I won't have that kind of behavior corrupting this town." "Questionable morals?" Mara felt something break loose inside her, all the fear and shame and anger she'd been holding back for weeks. "You don't know anything about my morals. You don't know anything about me at all. But you've decided I'm worthless, decided I'm corrupt, decided I'm the problem, all because I'm a woman alone. A woman who dared to take up space without a man's name attached to hers." She turned back to the crowd, her voice rising. "And all of you went along with it. All of you were so quick to believe the worst because it's easier than treating me like a human being, like someone who deserves basic dignity and respect." A few people in the crowd looked genuinely uncomfortable now, ashamed even. "I know what you think of me," Mara continued, her voice steady now despite the tears threatening to fall. "I know you've already made up your minds, but I'm not going anywhere. And if you have a problem with that, if you have a problem with me existing, with me working, with me trying to survive, then you're going to have to live with it. Because I'm done apologizing. I'm done trying to make myself smaller so you'll be comfortable." She looked directly at Harrison, And I'm done letting you destroy good people just because you want what they have. The street was completely silent. Everyone stared at her, some with shock, some with anger, some with something that might have been grudging respect. Mara didn't wait for anyone to respond. She just turned and walked away, her head high, her steps steady even though her whole body was shaking. Behind her, the crowd erupted into shouting and arguing, but Mara didn't look back. She just kept walking, one foot in front of the other, until the noise faded behind her. When she got back to the ranch, Cole was waiting on the porch. He stood up as she approached, his eyes searching her face. "What did you do?" he asked quietly. "What I should have done weeks ago." Mara's voice was hoarse from shouting. "Mara, I told them the truth. I told them I'm not leaving, and I told them they can all go to hell if they don't like it." Cole stared at her. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. A real smile. The kind that reached his eyes and made him look 10 years younger. "You really said that?" "More or less." Cole shook his head, still smiling. "You're going to get us both run out of the territory. Maybe, but at least we'll go down fighting." Mara climbed the porch steps, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her shaky and tired. Cole looked at her for a long moment, something soft and warm in his eyes. "Come here." Mara walked over to him. He reached out and took both her hands in his rough palms warm and steady. "You're the bravest person I've ever met," he said quietly. "You know that?" Mara felt her throat tighten. "I'm not brave. I'm just tired of being scared." That's what brave is, being scared and doing it anyway. They stood there, hands clasped, the evening sun casting long shadows across the porch. Mara could feel her heart beating fast, could feel the warmth of Cole's hands spreading through her whole body. She looked up at him, and he looked back, and for a moment the whole world seemed to stop. Then Cole cleared his throat and let go of her hands, stepping back. "You should rest. Tomorrow is going to be another long day, I know." Mara smiled despite everything. "You keep saying that because it keeps being true." Mara went inside, but sleep didn't come easily. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything that had happened. The confrontation in town, the things she'd said, the way Cole had looked at her afterward. For the first time since she'd arrived at the ranch, she felt like she truly belonged. Not because anyone had given her permission, but because she'd claimed her place, fought for it. And she wasn't going to let anyone take it away. But the fight wasn't over yet. She knew that. Harrison wouldn't give up this easily, and she was right. 3 days later, help came from an unexpected source. Mara was in the kitchen making bread, or trying to with the limited flour they had left, when she heard a wagon approaching. She looked out the window and felt her heart skip. Mrs. Henderson. The woman whose ranch they'd helped save from the fire. Mara wiped her hands and went outside. Mrs. Henderson was climbing down from her wagon, and she wasn't alone. Her husband was with her, and they'd brought supplies: flour, sugar, coffee, beans, things the ranch desperately needed. "Mrs. Henderson," Mara said, surprised. The woman smiled. It was a genuine smile, warm and kind. "Hello, dear. We heard you've been having trouble getting supplies in town." "Word travels fast." "It does in a small place like this." Mrs. Henderson gestured to the wagon. "We wanted to help. It's the least we can do after what you all did for us." Mara felt tears prick her eyes. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, we did. You saved our home, our livelihood. We would have lost everything if Cole and his men hadn't come when they did." Mr. Henderson spoke for the first time, his voice gruff but sincere. "This is just us returning the favor." Cole came out of the barn, wiping his hands on his pants. He stopped when he saw the Hendersons, his expression surprised. "What's all this?" he asked. "Supplies," Mr. Henderson said simply. "Heard Harrison's been making trouble for you. Figured you might need some help." Cole looked at the wagon, then at the Hendersons. Something in his face softened. "I can't pay you for all this, not right now." "We're not asking for payment. We're asking you to accept help from friends." Mrs. Henderson's voice was firm. "And we're not the only ones who feel this way." As if on cue, Another wagon appeared on the road, then another, then three more. Families from the surrounding ranches, all of them bringing something: food, supplies, tools, whatever they could spare. Mara stood on the porch, watching in disbelief as wagon after wagon pulled up to the ranch. Cole stood beside her, equally stunned. Mr. Miller climbed down from his wagon, tipping his hat to Cole. "Heard you needed a hand." A woman Mara didn't recognize approached her, shy but determined. "I wanted to thank you, Miss Vance. My son was sick last month. Fever so bad I thought we'd lose him. You brought medicine from the creek, some kind of willow bark tea. The doctor in town said it wouldn't work, but I tried it anyway. He's alive because of you." Mara barely remembered that. It had been a small thing, something she'd done without thinking. "I'm glad he's better." "So am I, and I wanted you to know, not everyone in the area agrees with what Harrison's doing. Some of us see you for who you really are." Another man spoke up, his voice carrying across the yard. "You fed my family when we ran out of supplies during the heat. Didn't ask for anything in return. Just gave us what you could spare." One by one, people spoke up. Stories Mara had forgotten about, small kindnesses she hadn't thought twice about. Things she'd done because they needed doing, not because she expected thanks or recognition. But these people remembered, and they'd come to show their support. Harrison arrived about an hour later, his face purple with rage when he saw all the wagons gathered at the Mercer Ranch. He dismounted quickly, his movements sharp and angry. "What is this?" Mr. Henderson turned to face him. "We're helping our neighbors. Is that a problem?" "The council specifically said—" "The council doesn't speak for all of us," Mr. Henderson interrupted. "You don't speak for all of us, Harrison. You might have some people in town convinced that Cole and Miss Vance are the problem, but out here, we know better. This is outrageous. The council voted to isolate a man for giving a woman a job, for treating her with basic human decency." Mrs. Henderson stepped forward, her voice sharp. "That's not moral standards, Harrison. That's cruelty, and we won't stand for it." Harrison's face went even redder. "You're making a mistake, all of you. The council can make things very difficult for you." "Then let them try." Mr. Miller crossed his arms. "We can take our business elsewhere. We can stop buying from your store, stop using your bank, stop voting for you in every election." Another man nodded. "You need us more than we need you, Harrison. You forget that sometimes. But maybe it's time we reminded you." The gathered families murmured in agreement. Harrison looked around at them, his expression shifting from anger to something that might have been fear. "This isn't over," he said, his voice tight. "Yeah," Cole said quietly, stepping forward. "It is." Harrison stared at him for a long moment. You could see the calculations going on behind his eyes, weighing his options, trying to find a way to win. But there wasn't one. Not anymore. Finally, he crumpled up whatever he'd been planning to say and stuffed it back inside. He mounted his horse stiffly, his movements jerky with suppressed rage. "You're all fools," he said. "Mark my words, you'll regret this." He rode away, his horse's hooves kicking up dust. The families stayed. They helped unload the supplies, helped with some repairs around the ranch, shared news and gossip and laughter. For the first time in months, the ranch felt alive again, full of people and noise and life. Mrs. Henderson found Mara later, as the sun was starting to set and people were beginning to pack up to leave. "Are you all right, dear?" she asked. Mara nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good." Mrs. Henderson squeezed her arm gently. "You belong here. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Not Harrison, not the town, not anyone." The words hit Mara like a physical blow. She'd spent her whole life being told the opposite, being told she didn't belong anywhere, that she was too much trouble, that she should just move along. But these people, these strangers who'd become something more, they were telling her different. "Thank you," Mara managed to say, her voice thick with emotion. "No, dear, thank you for being brave enough to stay, for showing all of us what real strength looks like." After everyone left, Cole found Mara sitting on the porch steps watching the stars come out. He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "That was something," he said. "Yeah." Mara's voice was quiet. I didn't think anyone would." "I did." Cole looked at her. You helped those people. Saved some of them. They weren't going to forget that just because Harrison told them to. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds. The crickets, the distant call of an owl, the soft lowing of cattle settling down for the night. Mara, Cole said finally. Yeah? What you did in town, standing up like that. That took guts. I was tired of hiding. I know, but still. It was brave. Cole paused. You're always brave, even when you don't see it. Mara felt her chest tighten. Cole, I need to tell you something. He turned to face her fully. And I need you to let me get it all out before you say anything, because if I don't say it now, I might never say it. Mara's heart started pounding. Okay. Cole took a breath. When you first showed up here, I thought you were a problem I had to solve, another burden to carry. I hired you because that stew was good, yeah, but also because I felt sorry for you, because I knew what it was like to be desperate and alone. He paused, his hands clasped between his knees. But somewhere along the way that changed. You stopped being a problem and started being, he struggled for the word, essential to this place, to me. Mara couldn't breathe. I don't know when it happened exactly. Maybe when you found that water, maybe when you stood up to Tyler, maybe it was happening all along and I was just too stubborn to see it. Cole's voice was rough, honest. But somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking about the ranch as mine and started thinking about it as ours. He looked at her, his gray eyes intense in the starlight. I'm not good at this, at talking about feelings, but I need you to know that you matter to me, more than the ranch, more than anything. He paused. And if you want to leave, if you want to go find somewhere easier, somewhere where people don't judge you, I'll understand, I'll even help you, but I'm hoping you'll stay. Mara felt tears streaming down her face. She didn't even remember when she'd started crying. I'm not going anywhere, she said, her voice breaking. I told you that already. I know, but I needed to say it anyway. Needed you to know why I want you to stay. Mara reached out and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. I'm staying because I want to. Because this is the first place I've ever felt like I belonged. The first place I've ever wanted to fight for. She paused, gathering her courage. And because you matter to me too, more than I know how to say. Cole's breath caught. He squeezed her hand, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on her palm. They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped, shoulders touching, watching the stars wheel overhead. And for the first time in her life, Mara felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Like she'd finally found home. The days that followed felt different. The air itself seemed lighter, like the weight that had been pressing down on the ranch for months had finally lifted. The supplies the families had brought lasted longer than Mara expected, and more importantly, they kept coming back. Not all at once, not in a coordinated effort, but one by one, stopping by with a sack of flour here, some fresh vegetables there, always with a kind word and a knowing smile. The town hadn't changed its mind overnight. Harrison still held considerable sway, and there were still people who crossed the street when they saw Mara coming. But the wall he'd built around the ranch had cracked, and through those cracks, light was starting to seep in. Mara noticed the change in Cole, too. He smiled more often, laughed at things Davis said during meals, seemed less burdened by the weight of constant worry. Sometimes she'd catch him watching her as she worked, and when their eyes met, he wouldn't look away anymore. He'd just hold her gaze for a moment, something warm and unspoken passing between them. It made her heart do strange things, made her think about futures she'd never let herself imagine before. One morning, about 3 weeks after the confrontation in town, Mara was working in the garden she'd started behind the house. It was still small, but it was growing. Tomatoes, beans, some herbs she'd cultivated from wild seeds. She was on her knees in the dirt, pulling weeds, when she heard horses approaching. Multiple horses. Her stomach clenched instinctively, that old fear rising up. But when she stood and looked, she saw it wasn't Harrison and his men. It was the Henderson family again, but this time they'd brought others. At least a dozen people, maybe more, all riding or driving wagons, and they were all heading straight for the ranch. Cole came out of the barn, wiping his hands on his pants. He looked as confused as Mara felt. Mr. Henderson was the first to dismount. "Morning, Cole. Miss Vance in—" "Henderson." Cole's voice was cautious. "What's all this?" "Well, we got a talking after the last time we were here. Got to thinking about how you're short-handed these days. What with Harrison scaring off your crew." Henderson gestured to the people behind him. "So we figured we'd help out, if you'll have us." "Help out how?" "However you need. Mending fences, working cattle, whatever needs doing." Mrs. Henderson climbed down from her wagon, a basket over her arm, and I thought maybe Miss Vance and I could work on preserving some of the vegetables for my garden. Winter's coming, and you'll need supplies. Mara felt her throat tighten. "You don't have to do this." "We know we don't have to. We want to." Mrs. Henderson's smile was warm, genuine. "That's what neighbors do. They help each other." Cole looked at the gathered people, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded slowly. "All right, I appreciate it, more than I can say." The day turned into something Mara had never experienced before. A barn raising, Davis called it, though they weren't actually raising a barn. They were fixing everything that had fallen into disrepair during the worst of the drought and the troubles with Harrison. Men worked on fences, replaced rotted boards on the barn, repaired the well pump that had been giving them trouble. Women worked in the house and the garden, preserving food, mending clothes, doing all the small tasks that kept a household running. And in the middle of it all was laughter, actual laughter. Kids running around chasing chickens, men joking as they worked, women sharing recipes and gossip. It felt like a celebration. Mara worked alongside Mrs. Henderson and two other women, learning how to properly preserve vegetables for winter storage. They worked in the kitchen, the room warm from the stove, their hands busy with knives and jars and boiling water. "You're a natural at this," one of the women said. Her name was Sarah, and she had kind eyes and flour permanently under her fingernails. "Have you done much preserving before?" "A little. I've moved around a lot, so I learned to make do with whatever was available." "Where are you from originally?" Mrs. Henderson asked, her tone conversational, not prying. Mara paused, her hand stilling on the tomato she was cutting. "Pennsylvania originally, but I left when I was 16. Haven't been back since." "Family?" "Not anymore." Mara kept her voice neutral, not wanting to invite sympathy. "It's just me." The women exchanged glances, but no one pushed. Sarah just squeezed Mara's shoulder and said, "Well, you've got family now, whether you planned on it or not." The words settled over Mara like a warm blanket. She blinked against sudden tears and went back to cutting tomatoes. Outside, Cole was working with the men on the south fence line. The work was hard but satisfying, and for the first time in months, he wasn't doing it alone. Mr. Henderson worked beside him, and the Miller boys were setting posts with the kind of enthusiasm that only teenage boys could muster. "You've got a good thing here, Cole," Henderson said, pausing to wipe sweat from his forehead. "Good land, good operation. Be ashamed to lose it." "Not planning on losing it?" "I know, but Harrison's not going to let this go easily. He's got his pride, and you've wounded it pretty badly." Cole hammered in another nail before responding. "What's he going to do? He already tried to isolate us, and that didn't work. The town council doesn't have any real power out here." "No, but Harrison has money. And money has a way of creating power." Henderson's voice was serious. "I'm just saying be careful. Men like him don't like to lose, and they can get creative when they're desperate. I'll keep that in mind." But Cole wasn't worried. Not really. Looking around at all these people who'd come to help, who'd chosen to stand with him despite the social cost, it felt like he'd already won the war that mattered. The work continued until late afternoon, when Mrs. Henderson announced that she'd brought food and everyone should take a break. Tables were set up in the yard, and the meal that appeared was more feast than simple lunch. Fried chicken, fresh bread, vegetables from multiple gardens, pies made with the last of the summer berries. Everyone gathered around, passing plates and sharing stories. The adults talked about crops and weather and local news. The children played in the yard, their shouts and laughter echoing across the ranch. Mara found herself sitting between Mrs. Henderson and Sarah, listening to them talk about their families, their lives, their hopes for the coming year. And for the first time, they asked her about herself. Not in the prying, judgmental way people usually did, but with genuine interest. What made you come to Iron Ridge, Chase? Sarah asked. Mara thought about how to answer. I was looking for work, heard there might be opportunities here. Must have been hard traveling alone like that. It was, but I've gotten used to it over the years, or I thought I had. Mara glanced over at Cole, who was talking with the men a few tables away. This place is different, though. Different how? Mrs. Henderson asked gently. It's the first place I've wanted to stay. The women smiled at each other knowingly, and Mara felt her cheeks warm. Cole's a good man, Mrs. Henderson said. Lost his parents young, had to take over the ranch when he was barely 20. He's been alone a long time. Too long, if you ask me. We're just... Mara started, but Mrs. Henderson waved her off. You're just exactly what you need to be. Don't let anyone tell you different. As the sun started to set, people began packing up to leave. But before they did, Mr. Henderson gathered everyone together. I want to say something, he announced, his voice carrying across the yard. I want to thank Cole and Miss Vance for reminding us what matters. It's not what the town council says. It's not what Harrison thinks is proper. It's how we treat each other, how we help each other when times get hard. He paused, looking around at the gathered faces. What Harrison's been doing, trying to destroy a man's livelihood over petty jealousy and greed, it's not right. And I think it's time we stood up and said so. Not just by bringing supplies out here, but by making it clear to the town that we won't support leaders who behave that way. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. So I'm proposing we call for a new town council election. Get some people in there who actually represent our values, not Harrison's bank account. The murmurs turned to louder voices, people nodding and calling out their support. Cole stepped forward, his expression serious. I appreciate this, all of it, but I don't want anyone putting themselves at risk on my account. It's not just on your account, Mr. Miller spoke up. It's on all our accounts. Harrison's been running this town like his personal fiefdom for too long, using his money to control everything. Maybe it's time we reminded him that he works for us, not the other way around. More shouts of agreement. Henderson turned to Cole. So what do you say? Will you support us in this? Cole looked at Mara. She gave a small nod. Yeah, Cole said. I will. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Plans were made right there in the yard. Who would organize the petition for new elections? Who would talk to which families? How they'd spread the word without Harrison shutting them down too quickly. It was getting dark by the time everyone finally left, but there was an energy in the air that felt electric. Hopeful. Mara and Cole stood on the porch watching the last wagon disappear down the road. That really just happened, Mara said quietly. Yeah. They're going to fight the town council because of us, because of what's right. Cole turned to look at her. There's a difference. Mara leaned against the porch railing, suddenly exhausted. I'm scared, Cole. What if this backfires? What if Harrison finds a way to hurt them? He might try, but he's one man, and there are dozens of them, hundreds, if this spreads like I think it will. Cole moved to stand beside her. You can't control how other people choose to fight their battles, Mara. All you can do is stand for what you believe is right and hope others do the same. Is that what you're doing? Standing for what's right? I'm standing for you, and yeah, I think that's right. Mara looked up at him, and in the lamplight spilling from the window, she could see every detail of his face. The strong jaw, the serious eyes, the mouth that smiled so rarely but meant so much when it did. I don't deserve this, she said quietly. People fighting for me, risking things for me. Yes, you do. You just don't see it yet. Cole reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers gentle. You're worth fighting for, Mara. Worth standing up for. I wish you could see yourself the way I see you. How do you see me? Cole was quiet for a moment, his hand still near her face. Like you're the strongest person I've ever met. Like you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Like you're... He stopped, swallowed. Like you're mine. Mara's breath caught. Cole! I know it's too soon. I know we haven't... There's been so much chaos, and I don't want to add to it. But I need you to know how I feel. Because tomorrow isn't promised. and I've wasted too much time already being afraid to say what's true." "What's true?" Mara's voice was barely a whisper. "That I love you. That I have for a while now, even though I tried to tell myself it was something else. Respect, gratitude, anything but what it actually is." Cole's voice was rough, honest. "I love you, Mara, and I don't expect you to say it back. I just needed you to know." Mara felt tears streaming down her face, but for once, they weren't tears of sadness or fear or frustration. They were tears of relief, of joy, of finally being seen and valued and loved. "I love you too," she said, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess them. "I've been afraid to admit it, afraid to let myself want this. But I do. I love you, Cole." Cole's expression transformed. The serious, guarded look melted away, replaced by something so tender it made Mara's heart ache. He cupped her face in both hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "Can I kiss you?" Mara nodded, not trusting her voice. Cole leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. But she didn't. She met him halfway, their lips touching in a kiss that was gentle at first, tentative, like they were both afraid of breaking something precious. Then it deepened, became more certain. Cole's arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, and Mara let herself sink into it, let herself feel safe and wanted and loved in a way she'd never felt before. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. Mara pulled back slightly, her eyes wide. "What?" "Marry me. I know it's fast, and I know we've got 1,000 things to figure out first. But I also know I don't want to spend another day without you being mine in every way that matters." Cole's voice was steady, sure. "So marry me, Mara. Make this official. Show the whole damn town that you belong here and I belong to you." Mara's mind was spinning. Marriage. She'd never let herself even think about marriage. Had convinced herself years ago that it wasn't for her, that she was too broken, too difficult, too much trouble for anyone to want permanently. But Cole wanted her. Not despite who she was, but because of it. "Yes," she heard herself say. "Yes, I'll marry you." Cole's smile was blinding. He kissed her again, harder this time, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. Mara laughed, the sound pure and joyful and free. When he set her down, they were both grinning like fools. "We should tell people," Cole said. "We should probably wait until morning." "Probably." But Cole didn't let go of her. "I have something for you. Wait here." He disappeared into the house, leaving Mara standing on the porch, her hand pressed to her mouth, hardly believing this was real. He came back a moment later, holding something small in his hand. "It was my mother's," he said, opening his palm to reveal a ring. "Only thing I have left of her besides the ranch. It's not fancy, but it's perfect." Mara stared at the ring. It was simple, made of silver with a small stone that caught the lamplight. Beautiful in its simplicity. Cole took her hand, his fingers trembling slightly as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her all along. "There," Cole said softly. "Now you're mine, and I'm yours. No matter what Harrison or the town or anyone else says." Mara looked down at the ring, then back up at Cole. "I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of this being too good, of something going wrong, of—" She stopped, struggling to put the fear into words. "Of losing this, losing you." Cole pulled her close again, his arms solid and warm around her. "You're not going to lose me. I'm not going anywhere. You can't promise that." "No, but I can promise I'll fight like hell to keep this. Keep you." He pulled back just enough to look her in the eye. "We've survived everything else. We'll survive whatever comes next, too." Mara wanted to believe him. And looking into his eyes, seeing the determination and love there, she found that she did. They stood on the porch for a long time, holding each other, watching the stars come out one by one. And for the first time in her life, Mara let herself believe in happy endings. The news of their engagement spread through the community like wildfire. Some people were thrilled, offering congratulations and help with planning a wedding. Others were scandalized, convinced this just proved everything Harrison had been saying about improper behavior. But Mara found she didn't care what the second group thought. She'd spent too many years worrying about other people's opinions, trying to make herself acceptable to people who would never accept her anyway. She was done with that. The wedding was planned for mid-December, giving them time to get through the fall harvest and prepare properly. Mrs. Henderson insisted on helping Mara make a dress, and several other women volunteered to help with food and decorations. It felt surreal. Mara had never imagined having a wedding, and certainly not one where people actually wanted to help, wanted to celebrate with her. But here she was, standing in Mrs. Henderson's parlor while the woman pinned fabric around her, discussing lace and buttons like it was the most natural thing in the world. "You're going to be a beautiful bride," Mrs. Henderson said, stepping back to examine her work. "I don't need to be beautiful. I just need the dress to not fall apart." Nonsense. Every woman deserves to feel beautiful on her wedding day. Mrs. Henderson's voice was firm but kind, especially women who've spent too long being told they're not. Mara felt tears prick her eyes. "How did you know?" "Because I see the way you hold yourself sometimes, like you're apologizing for taking up space." Mrs. Henderson took Mara's hands. "But you don't have to apologize anymore. You've earned your place here. You've earned happiness. I'm still waiting for something to go wrong." "I know that feeling. Had it myself when I married Mr. Henderson. Kept thinking I didn't deserve someone so good, that it was all going to fall apart." She smiled. "But 30 years later, here we are. Sometimes good things really do last." Mara wanted to believe her, was trying to believe her, but the fear was still there, lurking in the back of her mind. Harrison made his move 2 weeks before the wedding. Mara was in town with Cole, picking up some supplies from one of the few merchants who'd agreed to sell to them again. They were just leaving the store when Harrison appeared, blocking their path. "Cole, Miss Vance." His voice was cold, formal. "Harrison." Cole's hand moved to Mara's back, protective. "Something you need?" "Actually, yes. I wanted to inform you personally. The bank is calling in your loan." Cole went very still. "What?" "Your loan. The one you took out 3 years ago to upgrade the ranch equipment. It's being called in. Full payment due in 30 days. You can't do that. That loan isn't due for another 2 years. Actually, I can. There's a clause in the contract. If the bank determines you're a credit risk, we can demand immediate payment." Harrison's smile was thin and cruel. "And given recent events, the loss of cattle, the labor troubles, your association with unsavory elements, the bank has determined you are indeed a risk." Mara felt her blood run cold. "This is because of me. This is because of poor business practices and questionable moral choices." Harrison's eyes were hard. "I tried to warn you, Cole. Tried to tell you she'd be your ruin. But you wouldn't listen." "How much?" Cole's voice was tight. $1,500. Cole's face went white. Mara knew, even without asking, that he didn't have that kind of money. Not liquid. Everything was tied up in the ranch, in cattle and equipment and land. "I need time to arrange. You have 30 days, not a day more." Harrison stepped aside. "Good day to you both." He walked away, leaving them standing in the street. Cole stood frozen for a long moment. Then he turned and walked to the wagon, his movements stiff and mechanical. Mara followed, her mind racing. "Cole, not now." "But we need to figure out," I said. "Not now, Mara." His voice was sharp, and she flinched. They rode back to the ranch in silence. Mara wanted to say something, wanted to help, but she had no idea how. She had no money, no resources, nothing to offer except her presence. And right now, that didn't feel like enough. When they got back to the ranch, Cole went straight to the barn without a word. Mara stood in the yard, watching him go, feeling helpless and angry and scared. Davis approached, his expression concerned. "What happened?" "Harrison called in Cole's loan, wants full payment in 30 days. Davis's face went grim. "That son of a—" He stopped himself. "How much?" $1,500. Davis let out a low whistle. "That's a lot of money." "We don't have it, do we?" "Not without selling off most of the cattle. And if we do that, we won't have a ranch worth keeping." Mara felt like she was going to be sick. This was her fault, all of it. If she'd just left when Tyler first suggested it, if she'd walked away instead of fighting back, none of this would be happening. I should go, she said quietly. What? This is because of me. Harrison's doing this because Cole won't get rid of me, so if I leave, you think he'll call off the loan? Mara, this isn't about you anymore. This is about Harrison wanting this land and using whatever excuse he can to get it. Davis's voice was firm. You leaving won't change that. But maybe, no, don't even think it. You leave now and you'll break Cole's heart, and he's going to need all his strength to fight this. Mara wanted to argue, but she couldn't find the words, so she just nodded and went inside, feeling more lost than she had in months. Cole didn't come in for dinner, didn't come in at all that night. Mara waited up, watching the window, but he stayed in the barn. She understood. He needed space to think, to process, but it hurt anyway. The next morning, Cole was up before dawn, working with a fierce intensity that worried Mara. He threw himself into every task, pushing himself and the men harder than usual. He barely spoke to her, barely looked at her. And Mara felt the distance growing between them like a physical thing. 3 days passed like this. 3 days of Cole working himself to exhaustion and barely acknowledging her existence. 3 days of Mara trying to help and being shut out at every turn. On the 4th day, she'd had enough. She found him in the barn repairing a saddle that didn't really need repairing. Cole, busy. I can see that. We need to talk. Nothing to talk about. There's everything to talk about. Mara walked over and took the saddle out of his hands. Look at me. Cole finally met her eyes, and what she saw there made her heart ache. He looked exhausted, defeated, like he'd aged 10 years in 4 days. This isn't your fault, she said quietly. Isn't it? Harrison made it pretty clear why he's doing this. Harrison's doing this because he's a greedy, spiteful man who can't stand losing. That's not on you. It's not on me. It's on him. But if I hadn't, what? If you hadn't hired me, if you hadn't stood up for me, if you hadn't proposed, Mara's voice shook. If you hadn't done any of those things, you'd still have the ranch. Is that what you're thinking? Cole didn't answer, which was answer enough. Mara felt something break inside her. Then maybe I should make this easy for you. Maybe I should just leave. Don't. Cole's voice was sharp. Don't do that. Why not? You've been pushing me away for days. You won't talk to me, won't look at me. Clearly you're regretting. I don't regret you. Cole grabbed her shoulders. I don't regret any of it. I'm just trying to figure out how to fix this mess without losing everything. You won't lose everything. We'll figure it out. How? We don't have the money. We can't get the money. And even if we sell the cattle, it won't be enough and we'll be ruined anyway. Cole let go of her, running his hands through his hair. I'm out of options, Mara. I don't know what to do. Mara's mind was racing. There had to be something. Some way to raise the money or buy more time or... An idea hit her. Crazy. Desperate. But maybe... What if we asked for help? She said. What? The families. The people who came to help before. What if we told them what's happening and asked for help? Cole shook his head. I can't ask people for money. Why not? They offered to help before. This is just another kind of help. It's different. They brought supplies, labor. It's too much. Is it? Or is your pride telling you it's too much? Mara stepped closer. Cole, you're not alone anymore. You have people who care about you, who want to see you succeed. Let them help. Cole looked torn, conflicted. Mara could see him wrestling with it. Please, she said quietly. Let me try. Let me talk to Mrs. Henderson at least. See if there's anything they can do. Finally, Cole nodded. All right, but I'm not getting my hopes up. Fair enough. Mara went to see Mrs. Henderson the next day. The woman listened to the whole story, her expression growing more and more angry. That snake, she said when Mara finished. That absolute snake. I know it's a lot of money. I know most people don't have that kind of, hush, I'm thinking. Mrs. Henderson paced her kitchen. $1,500, that's more than most families see in 2 years. Mara's heart sank. She'd known it was a long shot, but hearing it put that way made it feel impossible. Then Mrs. Henderson stopped pacing. But it's not impossible, not if we all chip in. What? There are at least 20 families who've been helped by you and Cole. If each family contributed what they could, even just $50 or $75, we could get close. Maybe not all the way, but close enough to negotiate. You'd do that? Of course we would. That's what community means. Mrs. Henderson grabbed Mara's hands. You let me handle this. I'll talk to people. We'll see what we can do. True to her word, Mrs. Henderson organized quickly. Within a week, she'd talked to every family in the area, explained the situation, and asked for help. The response was overwhelming. Some families could only give $20. Others gave $100. A few gave more. And all of them gave willingly, even those who were struggling themselves. When Mrs. Henderson came to the ranch with the total, Mara could barely believe it. $1,400, Mrs. Henderson said, setting the money on the table. We're $100 short, but it's close, and I think with this much, you might be able to negotiate with Harrison. Cole stared at the money, his throat working. I can't take this. Yes, you can, and you will. Mrs. Henderson's voice was firm. This community has decided you're worth saving, Cole Mercer. Don't you dare insult us by refusing. But I don't know when I can pay it back. Then don't pay it back. Consider it a gift, or pay it forward by helping the next person who needs it. She smiled. That's how community works. We take care of each other. Cole looked at Mara, his eyes wet. She nodded, her own vision blurry with tears. Thank you, Cole said to Mrs. Henderson. I don't thank you. Don't thank me yet. We're still $100 short. I can make up the difference, Davis said from the doorway. Everyone turned to look at him. He walked in, pulling a worn envelope from his pocket. Been saving for years. Figure this is as good a use as any. He handed Cole the envelope. Inside was exactly $100. Davis? Cole's voice broke. Don't get sentimental on me, boss. Just take it and pay off that loan before Harrison finds another way to screw us. Cole stood up and pulled Davis into a hard hug. The older man patted his back awkwardly but didn't pull away. When they finally separated, both men were wiping their eyes. The next day, Cole went to the bank. Mara insisted on going with him, and he didn't argue. Harrison was in his office when they arrived. His expression of smug satisfaction faltered when he saw them. Cole, Miss Vance, I didn't expect to see you here so soon. I'm here to pay off the loan. Cole set a bag on Harrison's desk. Inside was $1,500, every penny of it. Harrison's face went pale, then red. Where did you get this kind of money? That's my business. Harrison counted it slowly, clearly hoping to find it short. But it was all there. This settles the loan, Cole said. I want the papers marked paid in full. Of course. Harrison's voice was tight. He pulled out the loan documents and stamped them with shaking hands. There. Paid in full. Cole took the papers and turned to leave. This doesn't change anything, Harrison called after them. You're still outcasts. The town still wants nothing to do with you. Cole stopped in the doorway. The town isn't you, Harrison, and I think you're about to learn that lesson the hard way. They walked out, and Mara could feel Harrison's eyes burning into their backs. The election for the new town council happened 3 weeks later. Mara and Cole didn't participate directly. They weren't technically town residents, but they watched as the community they'd come to care about fought for change. Mr. Henderson ran for council head. So did Mr. Miller and several others who'd supported Cole and Mara. Harrison ran too, of course, but for the first time in years he faced real opposition. The election was close, tense, but when the votes were counted, Henderson had won. The celebration at the ranch that night was subdued but heartfelt. The families came by to share the news, to toast the victory, to talk about the changes they wanted to see. This is just the beginning, Henderson said. We've got a lot of work to do to undo the damage Harrison caused, but at least now we can start. Cole shook his hand. Thank you for everything. Thank us by living a good life, by being happy. Henderson looked at Mara. Both of you. The wedding happened on a cold December morning. The church was packed, standing room only. Everyone who'd supported them was there. along with plenty of people who'd stayed neutral but wanted to witness history. Even a few who'd been against them showed up, curious or perhaps reconsidering their positions. Mara wore the dress Mrs. Henderson had made, simple but beautiful. Her hair was pinned up with wildflowers that somehow still bloomed despite the cold. Davis walked her down the aisle, his arm steady, his eyes suspiciously wet. And at the front, waiting for her, was Cole. He looked handsome in his Sunday best, his hair combed back, his face clean-shaven. But what made Mara's breath catch was the expression in his eyes. Pure love, pure joy, pure certainty. The ceremony was simple, traditional words spoken by the same preacher who'd known Cole since childhood. But when it came time for vows, they each added their own. Mara went first, her voice shaking but clear. I promise to stay, even when it's hard, even when it's scary. I promise to choose this life, this place, this man, every single day. I promise to never stop fighting for us. Cole's voice was rough with emotion when he spoke. I promise to give you a home, not just a house, but a place where you belong, where you're wanted, where you're loved. I promise to stand beside you, no matter what the world throws at us. I promise to see you, always, for who you really are. There wasn't a dry eye in the church. The preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and Cole kissed her like it was the most natural thing in the world, like she was precious, like she was his, because she was. The congregation erupted in applause and cheers. Afterward, there was food, so much food. A feast spread out across tables in the church hall, contributions from every family who'd supported them. Chicken and ham and vegetables and pies and cakes and bread, still warm from the oven. People ate and talked and laughed. Music started up. Someone had brought a fiddle, and couples began dancing. Cole led Mara out onto the floor for the first dance. She'd never learned to dance properly, but Cole was patient, guiding her through the steps. Happy? He asked, his mouth close to her ear. Terrified, she admitted. But yes, happy. Good, because you're stuck with me now. Good, because you're stuck with me too. They danced until Mara's feet hurt, then danced some more. And when they finally left the church, heading back to the ranch that was now truly theirs together, they rode through the cold night under a sky full of stars. The months that followed weren't easy. There were still struggles, still bad weather, and sick cattle, and all the normal problems that came with running a ranch. But there was also laughter, shared meals, quiet evenings on the porch, the slow building of a life together. Mara learned the rhythms of the ranch in a new way now that it was hers. Not just a place she worked, but home. She expanded the garden, started keeping chickens, learned to help with the cattle beyond just feeding the hands who worked them. And Cole opened up in ways she'd never expected. Talked about his parents, his childhood, his fears and hopes and dreams. Let her see the vulnerable parts of himself he'd kept hidden for so long. They weren't perfect. They argued sometimes, got on each other's nerves, had days when the weight of everything felt too heavy. But they were real, and they were together. In the spring, wildfire threatened the area again. But this time, when it came close to the Henderson place, the whole community responded. Cole and Mara were there with buckets and shovels, fighting alongside their neighbors to save what mattered. They succeeded. Together. And afterward, as Mara stood covered in soot and ash, watching the sun rise over land they'd protected, she felt something she'd never felt before. Pride. Belonging. Purpose. She'd spent so many years just trying to survive, just trying to make it through one more day, one more town, one more rejection. But somewhere along the way, she'd stopped surviving and started living. Started building instead of just enduring. Started believing she deserved good things instead of just hoping for them. The woman who'd walked into Iron Ridge with nothing, no money, no friends, no prospects, was gone. In her place was Mara Mercer, wife, partner, backbone of a ranch that had been dying and now thrived, member of a community, friend, someone who mattered, not because anyone had given her permission, not because she'd made herself acceptable, but because she'd refused to disappear, refused to let the world make her small. She'd fought for her place, earned it through work and courage and a stubbornness that wouldn't quit even when quitting would have been easier. And in the process, she'd learned something essential. Worth isn't given by others. It's claimed. It's fought for. It's something you refuse to surrender, no matter how many times people try to take it from you. Standing there with Cole's arm around her shoulders, surrounded by people who'd chosen to stand with them, Mara finally understood what she'd been looking for all those years. Not acceptance, not approval, just the freedom to be herself. Fully, completely, without apology. And the strength to defend that freedom no matter what. Years later, when people told the story, and they did tell it, passing it down through generations, they talked about the woman who saved a ranch during the worst drought anyone could remember. But that wasn't the whole story. The whole story was about a woman who saved herself, who looked at a world that told her she was worthless and said no, who fought for the right to exist on her own terms, who turned rejection into resilience, judgment into strength, hatred into love, who proved that belonging isn't about being accepted by everyone. It's about accepting yourself, completely, unapologetically, and finding the people, just a few is enough, who see you for who you really are and love you anyway. Or better yet, because of it. Mara Mercer stood on her porch on a warm summer evening 10 years after she'd first walked onto this ranch. Cole was beside her, silver threading through his hair now, laugh lines deep around his eyes. In the yard, their children played, 2 girls and a boy who had his father's eyes and his mother's stubborn streak. The ranch was thriving. The community was strong. Life was good, not perfect, never perfect, but good, real, earned, and hers, finally, completely, undeniably hers. Cole took her hand, threading his fingers through hers like he'd done 1,000 times before. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. Mara smiled. "How far I've come. How different everything is." "Any regrets?" She thought about all of it. The struggle, the fear, the moments when she almost gave up. "Not one," she said, and she meant it, because the woman they'd once called worthless had become exactly what she needed to be. Not perfect, not flawless, not without scars or mistakes or moments of doubt, but strong, brave, worthy. And finally, after all those years of searching, she'd found what she'd been looking for. Not a place where she was wanted, but the courage to claim her place, whether she was wanted or not. And that made all the difference.